Okay. Hi, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much, and welcome to the brand new McCourt School of Public Policy at Georgetown. We are the first major event that they've hosted, but I hope you agree it's a really lovely venue. You can't see it maybe from where you're sitting, but the Capitol's right that way. Couple of minutes administrative remarks as we get going. If you haven't found them yet, the restrooms are just out the hallway and to the right. There are emergency exits down that way as well. There's some coffee in the back for your emergencies. And then just a reminder that this is being recorded and live streamed. So with that out of the way, this project sort of started almost 2 years ago in a coffee shop where Christine and I were having a conversation. But like so many, watching what was happening in Ukraine and the incredible response of the Ukrainians, but also marveling at how private technology companies took such an active role in supporting Ukraine, whether it was Amazon, Apple, Capella Space, Clearview, Google, Maxar, Microsoft, Palantir, Primer, Starlink. There were so many that were engaged and were volunteering their services in support of Ukraine. And it sort of led to the question of, well, how are we using this tech coalition that came together for Ukraine here in the United States? As we continued to investigate that question, we wrote a little article in Foreign Affairs, which then precipitated a dinner where we were at the dinner with some of these companies asking them, how did you make this decision? Why did you make this decision? And how will you get involved in supporting US national security interests? At that dinner, Aki Jain, who is here with us today, said, you know, one thing that you might be interested in is what the 18th Airborne is doing, and you should go talk to Joe Callahan. So when he said it was the 18th Airborne, if you're not familiar with the 18th Airborne Corps, they're sort of called America's Contingency Corps. They are the folks who deploy anytime the need arises, and they deploy pretty frequently. Even in the time we've known Joe, he's deployed several times. So we knew when Aki said that the 18th Airborne had a system that they were using, that they were really seeing results with and happy with, that it could be something pretty interesting. So Christine called together, and this was the really fun part for me, I call them the OG ops analysis team, this amazing team of folks who have done ops analysis since the 80s and have seen a lot of activity. So we brought in Alan Brown and Tony Matheny from the Johns Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory. We were also able to bring in my boss, Igor Mikulich at the Center for Security and Emerging Technology. And we went down to go see Colonel O'Callaghan, and we signed a memorandum of understanding that said, we'd really like to look at the system that we've heard so much about. We'd like to understand it. We will analyze it and its how effective it is, and we'll tell you like it is. We told him, it may not be a good story, Joe. It might be a tough one, or it might be a good one, but we will be honest. And to his great credit, he did not hesitate. He let us in and showed us all sorts of things that they were doing with what we then found out. We didn't know at the time it was the Maven Smart System. He showed us a bunch of old PowerPoints. We were able to observe the Scarlet Dragon exercise. And at the end of it, what we found wasn't a bad story. It was a great story. It's a really impressive story, what the 18th Airborne has done with the Maven Smart System. And if you have read the report that CSET recently published called Building the Tech Coalition, you can kind of see the long story, but in short, they were able to work with the Pentagon, the frontline operators worked with the Pentagon and tech companies to iterate on software and AI solutions that improved the 18th Airborne's artillery targeting process to the point where that unit can now achieve with about 20 people what has previously taken more than 2,000 people. So it's a pretty impressive result. The case study, while interesting, knowing about MSS, while interesting, what is most exciting to me is that it is a case study of barriers overcome. And so the lessons that we can learn from this particular success seem worth learning so that we can continue to innovate and find new applications for AI and software. I want to thank all of the people who are going to come and talk about those lessons learned from MSS and NGA Maven. I think the sort of star-studded, we got an amazing panel. Everyone said yes to this panel. And I think the reason that they came is that it's a testament to how excited everyone is to see this working and really helping operators. While you listen to the panel, and I know they will share many interesting lessons learned, I would just love to highlight a couple before we get started, and hopefully you will hear it throughout the conversation. First is the role of leadership Leadership is always important, but in this particular case study, it was trilingual leaders, leaders who understood operations, they understood technology, and they also understood the acquisition process. It was also critically important that this team had flexibility and they could iterate as they went through. MSS exemplifies what good can happen when you pivot to seize a new opportunity, even if it wasn't in the plan. It also showed the incredible importance of rapid and continuous evolution. And third, really the importance of partnership and coalition building. Everyone that we talked to in this project said how important it was that the developers and the operators could talk to one another, could iterate together, could find new solutions that were sometimes technical and sometimes the way that they use the technology in the operations. So it's a lot of exciting news, I think, from this group, and I really look forward to hearing more. I want to thank CSET and APL and the 18th Airborne for supporting the project. I know at CSET we do a lot of important sharing of real stories, sharing of technically informed analysis, but this one was particularly exciting. I want to thank Domino Data Labs for helping support this event. CSET doesn't always do big events, and this is certainly a really big and exciting one considering the subject. And now to kick it all off, I get to turn over to Rear Admiral Liam Hullen. We are deeply grateful to Vice Admiral Cooper for connecting us to Rear Admiral Hullen. As you can imagine, Vice Admiral Cooper has a couple things going on in his theater right now, but we couldn't have been connected with a better leader for this particular conversation. Now, Admiral Hullen's list of achievements are very long and technical, so I want to summarize them. He's incredibly operational. He doesn't get much more of, you can't get much more of an operational leader. Admiral Hullen is a SEAL. He has served as the executive officer to the commanding general of the U.S. Special Operations Command, also the Joint Special Operations Command known as JSOC. He was a commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Basic Training Command, which most of us call BUDS. He was the commanding officer of Naval Special Warfare Development Group, which most of us call SEAL Team 6. And between that and many of his other operational tours, he is deployed to the Middle East, he's deployed to Southeast Asia, Central Asia, and North and East Africa. But perhaps most appropriate for today, Admiral Hullen is the Deputy Director of Operations at US CENTCOM, where he leads fires and effects and oversees CENTCOM's MSS efforts. Please join me in welcoming Admiral Hullen.
All right, I'm blind as a bat, but I made it up the steps. I'm blind looking out. I can read pretty well, but it's a victory just that I got up on the steps here and up to the podium without tripping over. So good afternoon to everyone. It's really great to be here. Thank you to Dr. Christine Fox. Thank you to Emmy. Thank you to the entire MSS team for inviting me here to speak and giving me free reign up here on the mic for the next 45 minutes, which y'all are really, really brave because with my Cajun and Irish roots, I have a tendency to go off in all kinds of storytelling and winding paths. I will try not to do that. No guarantees, though. So this is my first opportunity to speak at a Center for Security and Emerging Technologies event. But I'm really, really excited on the theme and the focus here on building a tech coalition. I got a chance to meet some folks, but I have a pretty good awareness on the types of folks that are here. And it's really incredible to have so many people from such diverse backgrounds here, all really, really important to keeping our country great and strong. I enjoy talking and hanging out with groups like this. I describe them as curious people, people who aren't afraid to take risks and challenge the status quo, people from government, business, industry, academia, the media, others. And when I think about groups like this, what I love about it is there's this mix that comes together of people who have a bias for understanding, they have a bias for care, and they also have a bias for action. So as I was coming into this week, I was thinking about that, those three biases that I think are really, really important to mix together in the group that we're going to have here. And I kept thinking about this saying that I heard years ago in the Middle East. In fact, I heard it in Yemen. I grew up as a kid in the Middle East, and it was super powerful. It goes like this: الكلمة بلا فهم ولا تدمر ولا عمل كالشجرة ماء بلا ماء ولا شمس ولا تمر. And what it means is words without understanding, thoughtfulness, and action are like trees without water, sunshine, and dates. And I certainly think that the folks that we have here in the room are the right people with the right perspectives to get after hard problems and press forward and build a tech coalition here. It was a pleasure, like I said, to meet some of y'all shortly before we started. It's a real honor for me to be here on behalf of the United States Central Command, or CENTCOM, on behalf of Vice Admiral Cooper, who, like Emmy said, is currently super glued in his chair right now in our operations center because of what's going on in the region right now, but also on behalf of all of our folks that we have deployed and stationed overseas. I just wanted to thank you. Up front, from my introduction, Emmy very politely said I'm very operationally focused. I'm going to translate that for you. You should know I'm not a cyber, information, intelligence, or communication specialist. I'm not an SME unless it means subject matter enthusiast. I'm not a scientist, engineer, tech whiz, or digital native. When I want to connect to the cloud, I walk outside and I look up. If you want to hear about Department of Defense budgets and programming, I'll tell you what I know about the Department of Defense's acquisition and programming is just enough that make the people I work for really, really nervous to let me outside of the house. And when it comes to VCs, private equity, investments, startups, all you really have to do is look at my bank account and know that I probably don't know much about that either. Most of what is in my bank account is tied up, keeping my 82 Bronco running, paying my dog's medical bills, and keeping my daughter's wardrobe stocked with the latest fashions of Brandy Melville. And if you have teenage daughters, you know exactly what I'm talking about. So after hearing all of that, right, you're probably wondering, like, am I in the right spot? Did I plug in the directions or get the directions off my GPS correctly? Was the AI working in it? Should I try to sneak out of here? What I would tell you is stay put, stick it out, because you staked out some spots that are going to be very, very useful in the 2 panels that are going to follow me. What I do think you're going to get out of my pitch, or I hope that you get out of my pitch, is an appreciation of where where our nation's most active warfighting headquarters is in terms of pairing humans and machines. And I'm not talking about how we used to pair with machines. We tell the machine what to do and then it does it. I'm talking about pairing humans and machines, and things like this have been said before, but pulling the advantages that both humans and machines bring in order to extend our efficiency, our effectiveness, to extend our capabilities, make ourselves more productive. If that teaser doesn't keep you here, I'll give you one last chance. Anybody want to leave? Okay, we can lock the doors now. Igor, you can lock the doors. They had their chance. Okay, so who are we? CENTCOM is a warfighting headquarters, like I said. We have the responsibility for the command and control of U.S. forces operating across 21 different countries in the Middle East and Central Asia. We like to say from Cairo to Kazakhstan. Our mission includes directing and enabling military activities and operations with our allies and partners to increase regional security and stability, and obviously all of that in support of our enduring interests. To do that, CENTCOM, like me, has and gets very little discretionary money. The money that we do have at CENTCOM is tied up in providing every advantage we can for our soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, Space Force Guardians, to give them an advantage over all those malign networks and regimes that want to harm us and harm our friends. To create this advantage for our forces in the region, CENTCOM started on an expedition about mid-2022 with the goal of increasing and changing how we use data in all of our processes and procedures. All the things we do associated with developing and refining understanding, making informed decisions on what to do and what not to do, and follow through in the command and control of our activities to make sure we maintain awareness, we track changes, and then we can adjust rapidly to those changes as necessary. This is an expedition towards what has been called data-centric warfare or data-aided warfare. And what in the Department of Defense we talk about in CJADC2, or Combined Joint All-Domain Command and Control. Said another way, leading our forces from all our different services in close collaboration with our allies and partners and across all domains. When I say all domains, often we say things like seabed to space, cyber to fiber. I think that explains it pretty darn well. CENTCOM, at CENTCOM, we have to be prepared, ready, able to fight tonight. And not just fight tonight, but win tonight in an area that I would argue is one of the most challenging regions in the world. And we need to be interoperable, not just across our own tribes within the Department of Defense, but also with our allies and partners. That used to mean that we shared the same weapons, we shared the same ordnance, we understood each other's doctrine and tactics, we had the same radios. But today, this means that we need to be able to share and pass data. Now, you heard me call it an expedition. I describe it as an expedition towards this data-centric warfare because first, it takes a lot of people to pull it off. If you read about expeditions, it's not just one not one person, it's not 10 people. It's a whole, it's a very large group to pull it off. And also, when I think expedition, for me, that connotates exploration. And exploration really doesn't end. You get somewhere, you figure it out, you look up, and there are always more paths, ridge lines, valleys, oceans that are there in front of you. And then you have a decision. What do I want to figure out next? Where am I going to go next? It's addictive. Once you explore a little, see a little, learn a lot, you want to explore some more. And really, that's the state of play at CENTCOM with data-centric warfare. There's always more to learn, figure out and do, and decisions on where each step along the way, where do we want to prioritize our limited time, money, and resources. Today, I want to tell you a little bit about CENTCOM's story, our data-centric warfare expedition. Here's the outline. I'll start with where we are today and how we're using the things that we picked up along the way. Next, what it took to get here. And then finally, I'll end with some waypoints, some possible next waypoints in the expedition. Few disclaimers. So first, CENTCOM's story is not about modernization. There are other entities within the Department of Defense that are looking out on much further ridge lines than CENTCOM. Our story, the way I would describe our story, is it's more about innovating, building better tools for right now, and having the flexibility to evolve for tomorrow. All you have to do is read a current event news article. Could be about the human devastation brought by Putin's illegitimate war in Ukraine, or the Islamic Republic of Iran and their associated terrorist networks that act like gangs in the Middle East, or the antagonistic, aggressive, and revisionist behavior of the Chinese Communist Party in Asia, or just the dangerous contractual relationship that all of these entities are building with each other. And if you do that, you can imagine how fast the battlefields and how fast the global commons are changing. I don't think anybody disputes that. Our story is really about staying on pace with this rapid change, orchestrating a disciplined approach to experimentation at the 4-star level, with innovation that is happening down at the tactical level, and then putting it into practice during the events that we see unfold every day in the region. This results in a lot of learning that's happening up, down, and across the Department of Defense. And this learning is reducing risk in programmatic development, but also, most importantly, reducing risk to our missions and our people. The other disclaimer is that this is not just a CENTCOM story. Emmy's introduction really highlights that. It's a story about the U.S. Army 18th Airborne Corps, other units from all of the services, the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, or NGA, other elements from the intelligence and interagency communities, DIU with Mr. Doug Beck up front, the department's Chief Digital and AI Office, universities, research labs, small and big, software companies that haven't typically or traditionally been associated with the defense industry. And then also, as Emmy kind of pointed out, engineers that are embedded with us and paired with our experienced operators and our military experts. I like to think of it as a Star Wars bar, not a Star Wars bar on Tatooine, most of the time down in Tampa, but really in multiple places all over the world. There are no Jedi Knights with bounty hunters that all work for Jabba. It's more, again, a Star Wars bar in Tampa with real Jedi Knights, or men and women in uniform, paired with data hunters that are fluent in Java. Like that, Java. Yeah, thank you. I'm really proud. My daughters were really proud of that one too. Even though, like, I actually don't even think they've seen Star Wars, but I need to work on that. Maybe they've just heard my jokes for too long. And then finally, not really a disclaimer, but a spoiler alert. This is a story about the importance of the right people at the right time in the right places doing the right things. Visionary leaders who set culture and remove barriers, and people who work for them who, as Emmy mentioned, know how to move between tech, operations, and acquisitions or resourcing. Some fluent across all three, some just quick learners, and in a job specialty, a job field where we rely on people to make quick decisions, life or death decisions in ambiguous environments. I'll tell you, we've got a lot of quick learners. Common to the fabric of all of these people is the guts to be tested, the maturity to onboard feedback, following not just near misses and failures, but also onboarding critical feedback after successes, the discipline after that to go ahead and put in the effort to improve. And then after that, it's a cycle, the guts to try and be tested all over again. The most important, you could talk to the 18th Airborne Corps, you could talk to any military unit out there. I'll talk on behalf of CENTCOM. The most important ingredient in everything we do has and always will be our people. So again, I started out explaining what we're doing in terms of an expedition. Let me tell you where we are in our expedition. Today, CENTCOM extensively uses a platform called Maven Smart System, or MSS. It's a CDAO and NGA funded program, and we partner with MSS's on-site engineering teams to rapidly prototype and implement innovative capabilities for our region of responsibility. There are other combatant commands or 4-star commands with areas of responsibility that are also using MSS to create innovative capabilities for their regions. MSS provides us a shared platform for data and artificial intelligence and machine learning capabilities, a platform where we fuse and filter data from 179 different live data feeds and relevant to all those domains I talked about: land, sea, air, space, cyber. We pull this fused data into different applications that our Star Wars bar has built along the way. to display the data in understandable and tailored to the user ways. This has increased and accelerated our awareness and collaboration across CENTCOM and across all of our subordinate headquarters. It's also created ways in our traditional processes to move through steps in parallel, vice the way we used to do it, very linear, very slow, a way that often required a human to swivel in their seat after they saw some information on one screen or got it over the telephone, or someone passed them a document with stubby pencil handwriting, swivel in their seat, and then transcribe this onto another screen from a different network into PowerPoint slides or a spreadsheet. And you can imagine when you think of that, I'm not exaggerating. That's how it traditionally works. And you can imagine in that there's a lot of potential for human error. It's slow, and you're relying on no distractions, getting every single one of those digits or whatever is being passed accurate. MSS is helping us more quickly and accurately inform decisions across a variety of different function areas critical to military operations. The most obvious for CENTCOM is command and control, where it makes it possible to maintain a high level of persistent all-domain awareness. But MSS has also been incredibly useful in the function of fires or the delivery of lethal and non-lethal effects on target in the way it helps us prevent errors on that transcription and helps us work through processes in parallel, vice waiting for each step along the way to be completed. Other functions where it's been useful have been in the movement and maneuver and protection of our forces. And then finally, we've also begun to build MSS workflows to start looking at ways to get after the function of sustaining our forces in the region. The key to MSS, and I know there are a lot of brilliant folks in the room here that understand it at levels that I never will. But for those that don't understand it, I think this is helpful to know that the key to MSS, the magic, like I call it, is really in the data management. I mentioned the 179 live data sources. The problem with this data is that it is all formatted different. And so it can be used on its own, but it's very difficult to use it with other data. MSS is powered by what we call the ontology layer. It pulls that data in, it standardizes it, so then that data can be fused and used together. And then exchanged with cloud and edge systems that we use to work different processes for us. So if you think all these data sets coming in, magic happening, standardized, now we can fuse it and use it. MSS provides a development environment where users from across CENTCOM can access the most up-to-date and available data, giving users from the commander all the way down to forward deployed units a shared source of data to view from different angles and configured with tools, or to be used in apps that sit on this data and allow real-time and secure collaboration. Now, some examples of the tools that we're leveraging using this ontologized data, this standardized data from all these feeds. So we conduct target discovery with broad area search, computer vision AI, and multi-source analytic tools. We're maintaining situational awareness using the Gaia app, a common operating picture that fuses these different live data sets. It displays the most accurate and up-to-date data for us, and then enables, like I said, the user to tailor his or her view and what is most best understandable to them. We plan operations using cross-domain solutions to move data from one classification level to another, and the Ops Controller app to collaborate across different locations, like I mentioned earlier, to work parallel steps in the mission planning process, saving time and, again, transcription errors. Another tool we use in the development of targets is the Target Workbench app. This app isn't telling us to do something. It's not making a decision telling us to to do something. What it does is it enables, again, different functions in the development process to start working on their steps in parallel. It enables movement of information between classification levels where appropriate, and again, prevents transcription and version control issues. So it supports both a deliberate and dynamic targeting process. And still nascent, we have the Maverick app that pulls in a lot of algorithms, pulls in a lot of data, looks at a lot of different variables that are important as you plan missions. So asset availability, time of flight, distance to target, asset fuel levels, weapon loadouts, and others to create possible solutions and simulations for specific targets. This is typically a very, very long process. Somebody has to go down and look at one of these variables very deep, and then may be looking in the wrong place, has to move out and look another place and do all of this one by one. This allows us to do this much more quickly, and then freeing up the humans to then look at what are all the possible solutions that are, instead of having to figure out what all the possible solutions are, and then put the energy and effort towards picking options that are best out of those groups. CENTCOM is heavily using MSS in a 4-star headquarters with over, like I said, 20 subordinate headquarters. We have about 13,000 MSS accounts. We estimate about 2,500 people a day, or at least a few times a week, are logging into their accounts and using it. That's about 20%. It doesn't sound like a lot, but if you understand all the disparate things that are being done in the headquarters, all the different locations that we're doing it at, all the different functional areas, 2 out of 10 is pretty good. And as we innovate and pull in new data sets and create new workflows, new apps that touch on some of these other functional areas, we're pretty darn sure more and more people will use it. So I've told you a bit about MSS. I hope folks have a pretty good understanding of how we're using it now. I do want to say that CENTCOM, we're agnostic about tech. If there's something out there that folks believe will make us more efficient, more capable, we're going to try it. We're going to stress test it to the max. We're going to try to break it. But if it survives all that and we like it, we'll use it. Okay, so I told you where we're at. Now I'm going to tell you what it took to get here. For a quick history, in 2018, the Office of the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security introduced MSS as part of Project Maven, a Department of Defense research and development initiative that had started a few years earlier to try and bring valuable insights to the warfighter via AI-enabled analysis of full motion video feeds. In 2022, the effort expanded through the AI and Data Acceleration Initiative to bring MSS to the combatant commands, to places like CENTCOM, and implement a shared platform for data and AI and machine learning capabilities. Since 2022, CENTCOM has become a prime adopter of MSS, and we continue to refine the capabilities through an iterative exercise series we call Digital Falcon Oasis, and through extensive use throughout multiple real-world events. So that's the quick history, but telling you this history doesn't really explain what was necessary to get us to where we are in the expedition. So I'm going to steal something from my predecessor, Brigadier General John Cogbill, a leader who has helped to drive our expedition to data-centric warfare as the Chief of Staff at the 18th Airborne Corps, and then in my current position as the Deputy Director for Operations at CENTCOM, and now continues to drive this expedition as the Deputy Commander after returning back to the 18th Airborne Corps. John describes 3 things as necessary in this expedition: culture, calisthenics, and catalysts. A culture of innovation driven by the right people. Calisthenics, or the sets and reps iterating, ideating, curating, and prototyping, supported by a disciplined rhythm of experimentation and exercises, and catalysts, or the accelerant of necessity, that drives you forward. For me, you know, when you think catalyst, my catalyst for getting my white uniform cleaned and ready to go was this event. I am very thankful of the AI that builds the menus. Didn't have spaghetti with marinara sauce today. So, but the catalyst for CENTCOM has been multiple regional real world crises that I think everybody is tracking. Starting with culture. It takes visionary leaders. I mentioned one, John Cogbill, but others include General Eric Kurilla, when he commanded the 18th Airborne Corps and now is the commander at U.S. CENTCOM. His successor at the 18th Airborne Corps, Lieutenant General Chris Donahue, and then a couple sitting up front with us, Admiral Trey Whitworth, the director from NGA, and then Mr. Doug Beck from DIU. These leaders have done this, have been able to create this culture of innovation by positioning and empowering those trilingual leaders that Emmy talked about, that are, again, able to weave between tech, resourcing, and operations. People like Major Paul Billy, and here in the front row, Lieutenant Colonel John O'Connell in CENTCOM, from CENTCOM's Joint Fires and Effects Division. CENTCOM's Chief Technology Officer, Ms. Sky Moore, that many of you all know. And also in the front row, Colonel Joe Callahan, also with us today from the 18th Airborne Corps, and probably the most, the biggest trilinguist that we have, or the most effective trilinguist that we have. Back to the visionary leaders. They have driven efforts to create digitally literate workforce with things like data boot camps to get us all speaking the same language. And they have also promoted the idea that you're not too old to be wrong and not too young to have a great idea. In the past, the oldest and most experienced person was assumed to be the most educated. And frankly, especially when we're talking about data, that's just not the case anymore. It's the opposite. Young professionals often know way more. They're more comfortable with tech, whether it's coding, gaming, or coming together to discuss new app development and discovery. One of the things that I think is incredible that these visionary leaders do is they still recognize the value of the other AI. The other AI I call ancient intelligence. You know, they know that it's important to have those people in your formations that know that a tomato is technically a fruit, but you don't put it in a fruit salad, to steal from Lou Holtz. So pairing this wisdom with this young talent, these people that have energy, passion, and knowledge, pairing them together, not just using the young professionals, pairing them together with wisdom. These visionary leaders push the idea of we can't do this alone or in a silo because, again, we all have limited time, money, and manpower. We need to find others to partner with, universities, research labs, communities of interest, brilliant people with passion like people in this room. And again, one more saying for you from a past deployment. When I think about that, bringing together the right people, not trying to do things on your own. I think to the African saying, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. These visionary leaders have emphasized the importance of data as a resource, reinforcing that where it is, how it is stored, how it is protected, how it is transported, and how it is fused with other data and can be used is all really important. And frankly, their efforts have really pushed a lot of our efforts in things like data governance, management, and access to the cloud. Next, from John Cogbill, is calisthenics and the disciplined application of technology and exercises. Emmy talked about this. I'm going to give you a little bit more about some of the things that started with the 18th Airborne Corps. So it started back in 2020, December of 2020, when 18th Airborne Corps partnered with the 2nd Marine Division during their Scarlet Dragon experimentation exercise. Now, ahead of this, General Kurilla, who was the 18th Airborne Corps commander at the time, recognized that with the advances in his Corps' equipment, he could use his artillery, his rockets, his missiles at much further ranges than prior. And so in order to be able to maximize their utility, he needed to be able to see further in the battlefield and target further in the battlefield. But in Scarlet Dragon, he had some problems. The first was there wasn't enough traditional real-time imagery to see everything across this expanded area. And second, even if he had the imagery, he didn't have the right people, the right number of people to scour over all this imagery and pick out targets, pick out threats. So General Kurilla drove a very narrow focused exercise, a fires exercise that aimed to use broad area surveillance technology, or BAS-T, computer vision that pulled data from commercial satellites and then ran a simple algorithm to sift through the imagery and identify a specific threat. In this case, it was an inflatable tank decoy. I think about like how awesome it would be is if you could get a inflatable tank to a bouncy house party, and the hero status you would reach in the neighborhood if you could. Anyway, inflatable tank sitting in a field at a really, really far distance. That was the first goal, was to try to find it. The second was then to pass data to one of his shooters, to one of his pieces of equipment that then accurately blew this tank up. And that's exactly what happened. So it was a success, but it took 743 minutes to do it. That's just over 12 hours. And that is not the kind of timeline that you're going to win a war on. But it was a really, really great start at something new. 2022, General Kurilla brought that same sort of mindset, that same experimentation exercise concept from the 18th Airborne Corps to CENTCOM, and partnered with the 18th Airborne Corps in an exercise called Scarlet Dragon Oasis. Now, after continuous improvements from that first iteration, instead of just trying to find and shoot a inflatable tank really, really far away, the new goal was to use live data in order to get to an ability where a commander and his team could make 1,000 decisions in a day. And why 1,000? Because that's the estimate of the volume of decisions a commander and his team may have to make in large scale, in some form of large scale combat, and decisions across all the functions of the headquarters and all domains. So in this exercise, this was the first time that you had a 4-star headquarters that was actually pushing data and pulling data from tactical units, and then getting those tactical units onto the targeting of dynamic targets, all from pushing and pulling data. So it was a huge success there, but we weren't where we needed to get to in terms of the 1,000 decisions, and it highlighted for us infrastructure adjustments that were going to be needed to increase the volume of decisions. Since 2022, this exercise program has transitioned into Digital Falcon Oasis, what I mentioned earlier, this experimentation series, and it's synchronized with interplay in the department's Global Information Dominance Exercise, or GUIDE series. The department's effort in CJAD-C2 to increase our collective global awareness, getting all the services to work together to develop rapid targeting capabilities, and then improving our ally and partner interoperability. So we run Digital Falcon Oasis every 90 days, and every time we get more and more cross COCOM with the other combatant commands, cross multiple services, allies, interagency participation. And in these experiments, the focus is stress testing new workflows that we've developed and continue to develop in MSS, and really to assess ourselves. And with every iteration, we just continue to increase the baseline of where we're at. These experiments or calisthenics on their own have been very, very important. Every day, there's more and more data to sift through that may be useful to understanding and acting. Every day, the number of things out there that are sensing, that are transmitting, receiving increases. Every day, we're finding new data sets that previously we thought didn't apply or weren't useful, but through creative development of new processes, we're pulling those in, and they're becoming valuable. And in the past, when you think of all this stuff that's coming in, it would have been overwhelming. AI and ML help with that. So it's not, you're not trying to find that one piece of data that you know or that you need, like trying to walk into the warehouse from Indiana Jones and the Raiders of the Lost Ark and find the Lost Ark in that wooden crate in that massive warehouse. We're not doing that. We're using MSS to help us find that important piece of data. So it's helping us to make sense of all the increased sensing that's out there. But where the 90-day exercise, this exercise rhythm that we've been on has been incredibly important, has been in all the catalysts that we've seen, the crises that we've seen really since 2020 across the world. So I'm going to talk you through some vignettes so you can get an idea of how we've used and matured MSS. The first was the withdrawal from Afghanistan, a situation with overwhelming amounts of information coming in every minute and from multiple sources, and the incredible task of managing complex, dangerous, and changing environments. It became instantly apparent that what we needed from the tactical level all the way up to the Pentagon was a common operating and intelligence picture. And we needed tools to sift through the data to figure out threats and communicate risk. This is hard to do unless you have live data at all the echelons and in the way that we were doing it. Through PowerPoint slides that had to pass through countless different levels and versions before it made it to decision makers. Even in its earliest stages, MSS quickly became useful in displaying data that all could see, from the commanders on the ground in Afghanistan up to CENTCOM and up into the Joint Staff. It enabled leaders to talk through the live data that they could see, where were aircraft and our forces, where were potential threats being detected. It provided a way to display what was happening in real time, not what was happening 15 versions ago in a PowerPoint slide. This catalyst drove learning, system improvements, desire for more access or more data, desire for more access to more data, and development of more apps. The next catalyst was when Putin decided that he wanted to take the rest of Ukraine. In this example, the 18th Airborne Corps packed up and headed out to Germany. They were told, don't start a war with Russia, but find a way to help and protect our NATO allies. To do this, they needed to build shared understanding with them and be able to pass them data. The problem that they had to overcome was how to do that from US systems on MSS to our NATO partners. We obviously had we have a strong and long history of training and exercising with our NATO allies, but not working with them at the speed and scale of war. This catalyst helped us quickly figure out how within MSS to push data from US systems through a cross-domain system, a gonculator that parses out the bits that we want to protect, and then send the rest to their proprietary systems that they were using. This approach to building this cross-domain capability has been important in developing ways to share data with other allies and partners, and also within our own networks, how to move data between different classification levels. The utility of our efforts in Europe with MSS helped to increase resourcing thanks to NGA, and then expand licensing thanks to CDAO. And also, and probably most importantly, generated a lot of interest with our allies on how do we more and more share data with one another. Another catalyst was the non-combatant evacuation from Sudan in the spring of 2023. This effort included 3 different COCOMs. So you had this evacuation happening in Africa. You had people being evacuated to Saudi Arabia in CENTCOM, and we were using forces and assets from Europe. Each three of these combatant commands started out with their own common operating picture, and not one each, but multiple ones for each combatant command. So it wasn't really so common of an operating picture. MSS where MSS comes in is it provided an opportunity for three commands to see the value of sharing and fusing and displaying data on one single pane of glass to ensure everybody had the same awareness. It allowed for shared and live awareness of things like positioning of convoys, status and video feeds from supporting surveillance assets, manifests of people on boats, and arrival times in Saudi. More than anything, this catalyst showed the value MSS brings to cross-regional or multi-regional activities. Final catalyst I'll highlight was October 7th. And when I talk about October 7th, I include everything terrible that happened that day, and then the cycle of escalatory responses that we've seen and the cascading effects driving multiple events over the last year. This includes Iran's large-scale attack on Israel on April 13th, the need to deliver humanitarian aid into Gaza, Iranian-aligned militia groups targeting our bases and people in Iraq and Syria, the Houthi regime's continued targeting of both Israel itself and commercial shipping with one-way attack drones, cruise, and ballistic missiles, harming innocent mariners, hurting global trade and regional economies, creating devastating environmental damage. It includes the opportunistic activities by Putin and the Chinese Communist Party in the region, seems that ISIS and Al-Qaeda exploit, and just this past weekend, the large-scale attack by Lebanese Hezbollah on Israel. We were fortunate prior to October 7th that all of our components were already actively using MSS and the tools that we had built on it. All of our operating centers sharing the same common operating picture and data, increasing awareness and understanding, informing risk, and driving rapid decisions off of live data. Events like October 7th and others in the region cause us to stress test MSS every day and work to access more data, run more algorithms, set more parameters, and use AI and machine learning to extend our capabilities and decision advantage. What started as a core level challenge down and in to try and find an inflatable tank is now at the 4-star headquarters level. From anywhere in the world, connecting through Wi-Fi and cell networks via VPNs or via tactical satellite, low Earth, and radio networks, we're interacting down to and up from the lowest tactical levels, looking across and sharing with other 4-star headquarters and pushing up to the Joint Staff and into the Office of the Secretary of Defense. As a clear example, all you have to do is look at what CENTCOM was able to do to protect, help defend Israel and our forces on April 13th. From a hotel room in another part of the world, General Kurilla was commanding and controlling all of his forces in the region, assessing risk across multiple domains with his subordinate commanders via shared live data, communicating intent, delivering orders, and sharing awareness with the highest levels of government at the speed of war all over MSS. Okay, some quick waypoints. We're just quick waypoints as we continue to move out in this expedition. So one, we're just getting started with a data literate workforce, and it's possibly the most important effort that we're focused on and should be focused on. But we have made some headway. 2 years ago, we had 0 uniformed service members involved in the front-end coding or coding in-house or the back-end coding. What we're talking about is the app development by engineers. So none. Today, we're seeing a lot more front-end coding by our uniformed service members based off of a train-the-train model, and we even have some talented ones that are doing both. A recent example involves one of our talented service members, Major Paul Billy, who I mentioned earlier from our Joint Fires and Effects Cell. Paul, using his operational knowledge as an artilleryman, understanding the things that affect your ability to shoot missiles, rockets, and artillery, used his coding skills to pull in data from previously unused data sets to help build a prediction tool. Data on terrain and soil type, water tables, weather patterns, road infrastructure, line of sight perspectives, to name a few. He used all this data to build overlays and a data-centric predictive analysis tool that helps us determine where and when we think the adversary is going to launch something. As we index his predictions against what we actually see, we're seeing a 90% accuracy rate in predicting when and where the adversary conducts a launch. So you can imagine, when trying to cover a large area of terrain with very limited overhead airborne assets, this gives us the ability then to better focus where we want to put them so that they can detect and hopefully prevent the launch of a missile or rocket. Another waypoint is I've talked about how powerful MSS is, and there are certainly ways that that we are using AI and ML that are proving incredibly helpful. But I think we're far from where we need to get to. There's more work, just in the near term, more work to do with computer vision to refine the ability to detect objects, and generative AI with large language models to reduce burden on humans. We have a lot of both man on the loop and man in the loop, man on the loop in a supervisory and quality control role, and man in the loop where their sleeves rolled up, building at every step with the machine. This will remain because of the requirement to be responsible with AI and the risks of not having a human, again, kind of sleeves rolled up in the process. But as we move forward, we need to continue to identify where machines can take over in things like calculations, things that calculations can solve, and get us to the point where the computer machine is providing us options so that we can spend more of our time on making critical decisions. Talking about man on the loop. So the computer comes and says, by Joe, I think I've got it. And we can say, no, not so fast, not exactly. Go back, do it again. So I think there are opportunities there. Okay, so I described where CENTCOM is today as we move towards data-centric warfare. I highlighted what was necessary to get us to where we are right now. And then I offered some possible next waypoints. To wrap things up, I got a few foot stops for you. All right, so if you fell asleep and just perked up for my Star Wars joke, wake up now. All right, first, like I said before, we're using MSS, but in general, we're agnostic to tech. We're always ready to try something new, stress it, try to break it, and if it works, we'll keep it. Next, MSS is not just a common operating and intelligence picture. I mentioned the Gaia app earlier, which does support this function, but that is just one app on MSS. Broadly, MSS is a data-centric warfighting system that we use that integrates all kinds of data sets, standardizes the data, applies some AI ML to identify what's most useful and accurate in the data, and then feeds apps that support the planning, preparing, and executing of operations. It allows a user to grab as much data as possible and display what's most important in informing the commander on risk and aiding his or her decisions. Data sets used in data management is important. Garbage in is garbage out. And then to use the data, it requires stable networks, infrastructure, and cloud access critical to enable the fusing of large amounts of data and applying AI and ML. Next, the use of AI and ML in our operations is not intended to replace humans, but rather reduce burden, increase efficiency, and enhance the amount of our effort. Again, like I said, actually focused on those critical decisions. That means determining where we need man in the loop, where we need man on the loop, where we need both. And in all of this being very mindful of good data governance and the protection as we work through classified and sensitive information. Couple more. There's no traction without friction. And sometimes that means failing. Instead of hanging up the cleats after a failure, at CENTCOM, we recognize the value and importance of failing to the process of learning. It forces us to relook our approach at a problem and generate new and creative, more effective solutions. This has been true in our expedition using MSS and extending our capabilities in data-centric warfare. It's hard work where failing and learning from those mistakes fast are critical to improvement and success. And then finally, I want to remind you again of the importance of John Cogbill's 3 C's: culture, calisthenics, and catalysts. To get to where we're at and to continue to press forward, we need visionary leaders that drive a culture of innovation, remove barriers, and empower those trilingual leaders. We need a disciplined approach or stick-with-itness in our calisthenics, those experiments and exercises that do the stress testing for us. And then we have a saying, finally, never let a crisis go to waste. When those crises emerge, using the tools that we've developed puts them at a much higher level of stress test, and that feedback, what we learn there, incredibly important. All right. Thank you, Dr. Fox. Thank you, Emmy. Thanks to the entire team here. My absolute honor to have the opportunity to tell you a little bit about CENTCOM's story. Again, not just our story, but our work with MSS and our contribution to the Department of Defense expedition towards data-centric warfare. Thank you.
Okay. Hi. All right. Well, we're going to jump right into this panel, and I've had too much time to speak already. I'm really excited for this assembled group here. Let me start with introductions, and I can never do any of these gentlemen introductions. It would take the rest of the time. But let me start with, on the far end there, Colonel Joe O'Callaghan. If you read the report, you've seen his name before. He is currently the 18th Airborne Corps Chief of Fires, overseeing the Joint Fires and Targeting Enterprise, and he is their algorithmic warfare expert. He's led in both airborne howitzer and rocket artillery units and combat and operational deployments. He has firsthand experience on the ground supporting operations for Bosnia-Herzegovina twice, Iraq twice, Afghanistan, the Joint Special Operations Unit in combat, peacekeeping, and operational deployments. I'm shortening it just to be very clear. He is a qualified master parachutist, a graduate of the Army Space Cadre program, and has completed multiple Army and joint educational courses. So that's Colonel O'Callaghan. Next to him is also Joe Larson. So I'm going to call one Colonel O'Callaghan and one Joe. I hope that's okay. Joe was Colonel Drew Kukor's deputy on Project Maven, and we're very grateful to Joe stepping in when Colonel Kukor got called away. He took over leading the team after Drew's departure. He's a reserve Marine Corps intelligence officer and information operations planner, who has multiple deployments in support of Operation Iraqi Freedom, Operation Enduring Freedom. He served as the deputy CDAO for algorithmic warfare and then went and worked at the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency. He's had several private sector positions related to data policy and technology, currently at Admiral, where he's now the senior vice president and chief of staff. He was at Telco Labs, a private equity firm focused on transforming highly regulated industries, and then was also at Palantir. And speaking of Palantir, next to him is Aki Jain. Aki was the one that first connected us to Colonel O'Callaghan, and we're still very grateful for that introduction. He serves as the Chief Technology Officer and President at Palantir's U.S. Government Services. He focuses on driving Palantir's R&D portfolio and enabling AI and ML operations across Palantir's USG businesses, to include Gotham and the Foundry platforms. And I think it's indicative of our conversation today that in his official bio, it reads that he spends most of his time iterating with mission partners, Palantir's engineering teams, and leaders across the civilian, defense, and intelligence practices. And then next to him, I have Jason Brown. Jason was also an intelligence officer, but in the Air Force, holding roles that included the commanding officer of the 480th ISR Wing, and he was the founder of the Air Force's AI Accelerator at Massachusetts Institute of Technology. He led humanitarian assistance and disaster relief efforts at the JAIC, the Joint AI Center. And today he is the first general manager of Applied Intuition Defense. He previously led defense professional services at Google. He was also kind enough to review some early versions of the report. So thanks to all of you for coming. And I'd like to start, Joe, with you, Colonel O'Callaghan, sorry, with you. If you could start and just kick us off to tell us a little bit about the challenges that you encountered leading MSS for the 18th Airborne. Do you think those challenges have changed at all? And what kind of support do you see that you need in the future?
Yeah, Emmy, thanks first off for having us all up here, and it's kind of nice because it's kind of a reunion. We've all been on this journey for several years. You know, specifically to your point, a lot of the challenges were in the original days. This was under INS, and so where Joe was on, Cam Stanley, if he's out here, and then Drew Kukor was the other. It was a bit of an insurgency in a sense, right? Because you had to put essentially the intelligence community through the 5 stages of grief. That no, we weren't going to remove your job. Yes, we're going to remove your job with computers. To a small degree, right? The human, you're making it easier and better, and having to change people's understanding of who they are with technology. And so at first it was really a cadre of industry, INS, and some partner units. And 18th is one of them. You know, 2MEF was another big one. Different organizations out of JSOC. And so we were able to move the ball forward by iterating very quickly, because there's really 2 different approaches to tech, right? There's an engineering approach where you do a top down and you build a plan, and this is what you're going to field, and you're going to go through a whole bunch of development processes, or you go experience based of here's what the commander needs, let's get there. But to do the first one lets you get there over time. The second one lets you accelerate, but you have to be partnered with industry, because industry is going to show you what's possible. And what's on the horizon, and together by working with government to the use case, you were able to really accelerate and move quickly. And that's where Aki and the team, Sierra Nevada, who's not up here as well, had a huge part. Maxar, Clarify AI, Teledyne, AWS, Microsoft, all these companies involved were helping move the ball forward. And that really got us to a point where as Admiral Holland talked about, you have a crisis, right? And we went into several crises as the 18th Airborne Corps because we're constantly on the hook to go somewhere. And as we iterated with the software and capability, the other factor is if you iterate to people who are undermanned and constantly under stress, they're going to grasp at it, much like a life preserver thrown to a drowning victim. And we did. We operated and we were able to do that. But what we actually found is that we were learning with industry, right? And so at one point we found ourselves in Europe, working as a result of the Russian action into Ukraine, and we were able to iterate very quickly, working with industry. In fact, 62 evolutions of capability in 10 months. And if you were to follow the traditional methodology before that, it's maybe you get one time a year to do a demonstration of tech. To get everybody online, you get about 9 months to do a down select to get there. And before you know it, the crisis that you're going for is already over. And you're fighting it on PowerPoint and in Excel. And you know, up until this point in history, probably the most lethal tool in DoD's architecture was Office 365, right? We've killed more people on Office than you'd ever imagine. But the truth is what happened was that was what we were doing. And then right about that December, I'm sorry about that. When did we start the transition to NGA?
Well, we started in 22.
Yeah, 22.
Yeah, early 22.
And so Joe started working back in INS on the transition to NGA, and this is where it got really good. Because what we were actually able to do was start getting authorities behind this insurgency. And so this is when an insurgency gets legitimacy, right? And this allowed us to really move quickly. And then we got oversight onto what was actually doing. And why, you know, oversight traditionally seems like a bad word to a lot of people when you're trying to move quick. But what it really was somebody checking your 6, making sure you're straight, and that you're actually doing what you're saying you're doing. And so we were actually able to really begin to accelerate into what we call scale. And so the challenges in the initial part were institutional. You know, you're breaking the mold. You're changing how people see themselves and how you see yourself. The other challenge was you had to have somebody come in and check your math, make sure you really were doing what you're saying you're doing. Because if you're not, then you could do something here, impart error here, and end off way off target, especially when you start doing stuff with computer networks scaling technology across continents, different data links, different service cultures, everything. But we were able to move forward very quickly once we actually began that off-ramp from INS into NGA, and then really begin to move forward once those authorities were in place, right? And that structure was in place because you had industrial security, you had the ability to check your six on your homework, make sure that the math was really real on what you say you were doing. And there would be a little friction at times too, because you were moving from a very agile small group of people to a slightly larger group of people working there. But it's good friction because, you know, the statement, and you heard Admiral Holland talk about, you know, friction equals traction, traction equals progress, right? That's kind of a saying in the 18th Corps. And that allowed us to find like where there were errors, but it also opened us up to better fiscal management of capability, right? Because you can throw money at a problem, but can you throw money responsibly at advancement? And that's where we were able to go. So where does that leave us today? The challenge today is really now that the capability of Maven has been really shown across all GCCs, the amount of emails and phone calls. If you'd ask my wife, I'll get a phone call at 2300 from XXX COCOM saying, how do we do this? It's quite fascinating. The challenge right now really is how do we take what has been created and advance it in understanding? Because the evolution has now been from how do we create a capability to what is this capability really is? And so Maven is really a story about data, about different views of data. Right off the top, most people may never have thought of NGA being the ultimate holder of data, but let's think about this. If you want to do targeting, or you want to find where an enemy is or a friendly is, you have to have the ability to say they're at an X, a Y, a Z on the Earth's surface. Okay, who owns that authority? Who owns the technology? Who owns the architecture behind it to do all that, right? And so now you're having to scale across that understanding across the Department of Defense. How do you take different services who have historically acquired and bought their own programs and say maybe software as a service or platform as a service is a way of doing business? And we do have a case for this. Again, remember I talked about what's that one lethal tool that we all use, right? Office 365. Never a program of record. Every service uses it, kills people. Sometimes kills staff officers making slides, but the truth of the matter is you're adjusting everybody's ontological understanding of who they are in acquisition. And so I'd say that right now is probably the biggest challenge. It's the acquisition side.
So I want to give Joe, you a chance to also answer a very similar question about the challenges that you saw from where you sat. Because I know you all work together, but I think you might have a different advantage, and I'd just love to hear it.
Sure. I mean, well, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for letting me speak. I imagine for the audience, it's somewhat of a disappointment because you're expecting Drew Cooper up here. And I know most of you probably know Drew. He is a much more entertaining figure than I. It's like when you go to the theater and you open your playbill and it's like the understudy is performing. You know, it's not Lin-Manuel Miranda. It's like that other person is Hamilton. So yeah, I'd like to answer your question and show respect to Drew by kind of telling a story that I think exemplifies Drew Kukor, who is both the visionary and founder of this enterprise that we call Maven, and him meeting Joe really is what led to where we are today, where it's two visionaries out in the wild coming together to make something magic happen. But in addition to providing that, I would maybe provide some substance to the answer about the early challenges. So, my role, I was basically his understudy from 16 to 19 when the program got started. And while there are a lot of people here I know that are exceptionally familiar with the program and its later iterations, not many of us were there in those years, 16, 17, 18, and we learned a lot about what it means to bring AI and data-centric systems to the department. And I'll reflect on a speech Drew gave where he brought together a combatant command and was speaking to several hundred people, including the combatant commander and their staff. This is probably in the 1920 timeframe. And Drew stood up in front and said, I am Drew Kukor, I lead Maven, and you are all probably wondering, where is all of the great AI that you're supposed to have? And he's like, I'm going to tell you now why you don't have AI right now in your formation. The answer is that person. And he pointed to the J6 of the combatant command, which was just a great moment, and, not content to just embarrass one person, he decided to continue to embarrass the entire community. And he said, the problem is the J6s. They're all blinky lights people. That was the phrase he used. And he said, blinky lights people, they just want their server rooms, they want their, their data centers, they want to be able to walk in and hear the hum of the servers running. And, because of that, we don't have AI. AI is fundamentally a capability that's tied to cloud computing, right? And the department had not migrated to cloud. So while certainly not a fair criticism of the J6, it was a pointed and perhaps, somewhat controversial way of raising what was a really good point at the time, which was Maven was founded in 2016 with the mandate to bring AI to the Department of Defense. I remember sitting in a room and showing computer vision algorithms to, at the time, Secretary Work, I think, who was in the room somewhere. And you can imagine the strangeness of a Marine Corps major and a Marine Corps colonel with the DepSecDef talking about AI, and then that DepSecDef actually starting an initiative to pursue it. It was quite remarkable. And we had to do that 3 years before the department had issued any contract for the joint warfighting cloud, right, that we have today. So in those early days, I mean, the problems were much harder and more infrastructural and less sophisticated than when we talk about Maven Smart System today. We don't have a cloud. We don't have data. We don't have any way to bring our data together. We can't train models. We can't test models. We don't even understand the workflows. So I would argue that when we look at the successes we have today, and when we don't jump to 2021, 2022 as the story and say this is how you innovate in the department. You actually have to go further back. Because I'm not sure in many ways the department has progressed on some of those early infrastructural challenges in a way that allows the department to sort of scale the lessons learned from Maven and do more Mavens. So in the interest of not talking forever, we can go into those, but I would just say the early challenges we faced 16 to 19 were some of the simplest problems you can expect with any AI Pathfinder program.
That's super interesting. Thank you. It actually sort of pivots us right into another line of questions, though. Jason, when I sent you the paper, you wrote something that I thought was really interesting, that you can't rely on a Kukor or an O'Callaghan to parachute into every situation and solve it. Yeah. Every hero's time in the DoD is fleeting. And so can you just talk a little bit, not just about how DoD scales the tech, but how does DoD address the people?
Yeah. Well, 2 points I want to make. The first is every leader. So we need heroes. We need the Joes. We need Drew Kukor. But we also have to recognize as leaders of an organization, whether it's private or public sector, the first thing you have to recognize is that effective teamwork is greater than hero work. And you've got to figure out how to understand that hero's time is fleeting, that you have to figure out how to get the team to be able to do what the hero is doing, or the team of teams to be able to do what the hero is doing, and be able, if you're going to scale, if you're going to last, right? And so it's really easy, though, to rely on heroes when they decide to stay in the government, as long as Joe Larson has, and we are all very fortunate in that they're the selfless leader that Joe is, for example. So it becomes super easy to just keep relying on the heroes. Every leader has to acknowledge, right, when those heroes you celebrate the heroes, but figure out how to build the team and the team of teams around what they're doing, so that capability lasts. The second point is this really, kind of some of the implications of the paper, which is excellent, by the way. And I thank you so much for writing it. Thank you for letting me be part of all of this. The second point is we have to look at every organization as a software organization. Every single organization, it doesn't matter what they are. Software is the key to competitive advantage. Software and data are the weapons that matter most. These are realities of the 21st century, right? And so when you start viewing all of these organizations through that lens, then naturally you start to upskill your folks. You start to expose them to new and different things, and industry certifications. And you start to allow, and one of the big themes here, and so as a commander of the 480th, we were one of the very first customers for Project Maven. And one of the great things that Drew and Joe did was ensure that our airmen were part of the product team. And by the way, the commercial partners that we worked with, in my case, it was Google. We were Google's customer for Project Maven. Our airmen felt like they were part of the product team, and these commercial vendors embrace that. That's how they operate. That's what they want to do. And that just in of itself, that collision of those very mission-oriented folks and those technology experts created something really incredible. And that is something that needs to continue. It all starts with viewing your organization as essentially a software organization.
So that's actually a perfect over to you, Aki, in terms of talking about the partnership that you formed and how that worked in particular on MSS and Maven.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think first and foremost, thanks again for doing the study and for having us here. And I'm so glad that you connected with Colonel O'Callahan and exposed to the incredible things that we're fortunate to get to work on every day through the Maven program and through other programs. So I think to the point of that partnership and to the quip from my bio. So I'll just use last week as an example. You know, I was lucky I got to go spend time at Fort Liberty looking at the recent warfighter and the results from that. A lot of where, you know, Maven was used and other technologies were used and kind of how that is, you know, how that has changed over the last 3 months. Then I got to go to JRTC at Fort Johnson, Louisiana. It's about as hot as it is outside, maybe a little hotter. But it was incredible to actually see it. And then hear from the Chief of Staff of the Army, his vision, right, on how he's thinking about this, you know, at his level, how critical he sees the work they're doing with Maven, with Next Gen C2, with kind of those warfighting capabilities where technology is the unfair advantage America needs if you're actually going to have a disaggregated command post of the future across the Army. And then kind of got a chance to go out to Colorado Springs and spend some time with some of the folks who work with on the Space Force side. And the common theme of all this is that, you know, whereas maybe 5-10 years ago, you know, there was a bit more of a, I don't want to say standoffishness, but there was certainly a lot more of a kind of like programmatic kind of approach to things. You can only talk to me on these days when the sun is at a particular angle and, you know, and Congress is like, you know, okay with it, to this recognition that the partnership between the entire commercial industrial base, not just the defense industrial base, and I'm not knocking the primes at all. We need the primes. Let's just be very, 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 very clear on that. And I think actually a lot of primes we get to work with are super excited about kind of where this is going. But that entire commercial industrial base alongside the defense tech and defense industrial base alongside the folks that actually have the experience, you know, the 3 folks on this stage alongside me actually have real experience in combat. They understand what it's like to be in a stressful situation, making a hard decision. I do not. I'm a technologist, right? And so being able to partner with them, partner with folks that are working through different crises, and getting access to the problem. So the young men and women at Palantir are working with the young men and women across the department to actually solve problems together. It's shared proximity and shared problem solving, and doing it in a way that's still fully above board, aligned with the programmatic goals, and where you see progress every single day has been kind of the key. One last point in there, just to kind of double tap what Colonel O'Callahan said about that transition to NGA, because I think it's so critical. You know, Maven was, you know, the startup of startups inside the department. I think they gave you guys the best office in the Pentagon. I think right next to that hallway where there are kind of some rats running around and COVID, there might have been some issues, but Joe dealt with them. But I think about the work that Colonel Kukor did, Joe did, Cam Stan did, in transitioning this into a program of record, right? And under leadership of Admiral Whitworth, Ms. Rachel Martin, to actually scale this program, to give it that oversight, the legitimacy. That people talk about the valley of death for startups or for defense tech companies, but there's also a valley of death for programs, right? And the leadership, and you know, you talk about the trilingual leader, the acquisition and contracting side, the thing we're all scared of, and certainly I've talked to plenty of folks in uniform who are like, oh, let's call a lawyer and let's be really careful. But the fortitude, wherewithal, and planning that was required by the military leaders to create that transition, to defend the position, to be objective about those things, and to get it into the hands of the organization with those responsibilities, to establish the program of record, to then create partnerships with DIU, with CDAO, to then scale it in certain ways. That just cannot, you can't underscore how critical that was, right? And that took time, took planning, it took a lot of probably debates, passionate debates, to get there. And I think that's a really important aspect.
Sure. And then Joe, Colonel O'Callahan, could you talk about what the partnerships look like on your end and what some of the efforts that you took to make sure that there was this partnership such that it wasn't just that one of the things I found interesting in the study, it wasn't just that the technology got developed, it's that you were applying it and changing the way you operated along with the development of the tech. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. It's kind of a case study. We're going to use targeting just as an example. Okay, it's a sexy and seductive side of the military, but rest assured the logic follows through for logistics and everything else. So it's a surrogate for a lot of discussions. Initially, to develop an Army tactical target, it was essentially create an X, Y, and a Z, where something is on the ground, what its elevation is, describe it, and send it down to a unit. And this is really due because the Army essentially fights within about 14 kilometers of a forward line of troops, right? That's how we do business, how our howitzers and everything are structured. What had happened from technology, because we were able to start streaming data in and bring lots of data together, is we were able to get far beyond 14 kilometers. We were actually able to get continent wide very quickly. And this also allowed us to stream together more compelling cases for what a target was, because we were able to start using the tech to start bringing down information. And so traditionally, what 2015, when I was the J3 and up in Erbil, it took me 10 days to develop the KR oil fields out. From that, it took me 5 or 6 days to get that through CENTCOM, 2 days to get that through DepSecDef, and then to get it on ATO was 2 days later, and we struck it. And then it took me 4 days to get the data back on it. By bringing the data together early in the process and then holding that data and allowing everybody to see it, democratizing it, holding that one data object in a data repository in the cloud, letting everybody see it in real time, allowed us to get development down on like targets through the Scarlet Dragon exercise and some real world deployments down to about 15 minutes. And so you're talking 2 weeks plus to getting roughly the same level of development in about 15 minutes because we're able to bring all the data together. And what that allowed from a self-understanding perspective was a real shift in our formation. And so intelligence stopped being about, I'm going to give you a target and you're going to decide whether or not to strike it, to intelligence laying out, here's the data streaming into you. We're gonna hold custody of this data and make sure it's correct and tell you what level of verification it's at. It's going to stream into you and you're going to make a decision. And that allowed us to move our targeting efforts up significantly, but it allowed just at the 3-star level, our intelligence apparatus to stop giving us essentially what we could go do to looking into the future. And they were no longer looking at what's right in front of us, but we're now illuminating seams in formations. And that allowed us to really start running that. Once you were able to exploit a seam, you're able to tear it up and move to the next one. But you knew what you were doing. You knew the results of it, or what you believed the results would be from a combination of rapidly ingesting on the flip side the reflections of it, but also because you had a coherent, cognizant strategy for what you're doing. And so in English, what I mean is you're able to identify not only the X and Y and Z of a tank, you're able to say what that organization was. And oh, by the way, what the effect is to an opposing force's operational approach. And so we were able to move very, very quickly, very, very nimbly. For us, a typical core intelligence and fire structure is about 140 people. We reduced that to 42. And we were operating, instead of doing a traditional 12 to 16 targets a day, if you look at Gulf Wars 1 and 2, to north of 200. So it allowed us to move much, much more quickly in terms of the tech. But the other thing that it really evolved with us too was we had an understanding now that we had to impart to industry what we were learning. And so if you were to ever see an operation at 18th Corps, 2 MEF, or CENTCOM, UCOM, SAG-U today, you're going to see engineers from different companies sitting with you, right? You're going to have Sierra Nevada looking at your data links. You're going to have Maxar looking at what you're doing with overhead imagery. You're going to have AWS looking at the cloud instance, because what we also found is we had a responsibility not only to do our job, but to educate each other. And so you ended up essentially innovating in contact with the enemy that you were working with or the situation you were working with. Additionally, you also found that you had to have discussions. In the past, your discussion was simply one echelon up. It was your lawyer to your next higher level of command. Talking about what we call authorities, right, to do something. What we actually found, we started having discussions all the way up, whether it was the OGC up in INS, or in many cases when we transitioned to NGA, Rachel Marchand, who's in this room, much to her chagrin, would get phone calls from me up till 2300 as we discussed what authorities we really needed to start liberating different types of data and bring it together. So you had that responsibility to not only do your job, but to educate and then almost pathologically figure out what the next increment was, what the next efficiency you could gain was on that. So you brought up responsibility, and you talked about how much faster and the number of folks that you needed to do some of these targeting efforts, which kind of, I want to bring up the responsible AI part of the conversation, because as many of you know, CSET does a lot of work on AI safety and responsible AI. And I just wonder, so Jason, I know that this is really important to you. You've done some work on this in the past. Could you talk a little bit about how responsible AI fits into these sorts of systems we're talking about?
Yeah, I mean, so responsible AI. So first of all, I think the DoD has done, and really, you know, across the IC has done some remarkable work in this field. It does become, it's become a bit of a loaded term lately, and I worry about that. I mean, fundamentally, we're talking about understanding failure modes, either before they occur or monitoring for them, right? And so it's really important to understand that software fails, hardware fails, people fail. And so you need to have a framework that fundamentally verifies and validates the readiness of those things before you employ them. You need to have a framework that fundamentally monitors whether those things are failing and then adjust. And then, you know, you also have to acknowledge that, you know, for all of the above, those frameworks to address those can become cumbersome, and they can become self-serving. And in that case, right, I mean, you can lose sight of the mission. So responsible AI is incredibly important. It's something that we take very seriously in my company and my previous company. But we also have to acknowledge that if, you know, there's always going to be this healthy tension between those who are developing and employing capability and those who are monitoring for failure modes, whether they're people or frameworks. There's always a healthy tension there, but everyone loses if you lose sight of competitive advantage.
So I'm going to speed up my questions a little bit so we can try to get to questions. I can't promise because we're running a little long, but I wanted to actually skip to, I guess, Jason, Joe. MSS is a pretty inspiring story, and it's exciting. I think there's been a lot of excitement about what has happened, but there's also skepticism in industry, I believe, that the government doesn't have the tenacity to scale. And I know that we're going to have a conversation about that in a minute too, but there is this concern. There's a concern that the investment that's coming from private equity or venture capital will not be patient enough to wait for all of this to catch up. Can you talk a little bit about your concerns? If there's hope, where you think this is headed?
I mean, 100% there's hope. 100% I mean, wouldn't be working with the government if there wasn't any hope, right? And you know, Doug's here, so the DoD has doubled down on DAU. It needs to quadruple down, octuple. Is that I just made a new word. I mean, just that framework, it has proven to, especially, you know, what I just described around some of the challenges, which is working through some of these very complex issues. DIU and the framework that they've created is a pathway that just needs to continue to grow and scale. But let's just talk about the reality, right? So Silicon Valley Defense Group recently released the NAVSEC 100, so the 100, you know, venture-backed companies and, you know, that are receiving government contracts. If I take Aki's company and put it aside, and I take SpaceX and put it aside, among the rest of the 98, the amount of government investment in those 98 venture-backed companies, the real fundamental software emerging tech companies, you're talking $10 billion a year. That's less than an aircraft carrier. That's less than the 2% of the annual budget. So there is a lot of work to do to be able to encourage fundamentally emerging tech, software, defense tech, dual use companies to be able to get in this game. And really kind of very last point around just why this is so important. Just predicting the future, right? Whoever wins this great power competition, it's going to fundamentally come down to this. Whoever can figure out how to leverage the many and the small to over the few and the large is going to win. And the fundamental way they're going to do that is through software data and networking and the ability to modify and update those things on day one, day two, et cetera, right? When the buildings are rubble, when the air is filled with smoke, when the enemy is fighting back. Whoever figures that out, that's who's going to win. And the companies who are engaging with the Defense Department via DIU and other means, those are the companies that the DoD needs now and certainly in the future.
I mean, you took a lot of my talking points on this question. I get very concerned with panels like this, and I hope this isn't seen as a criticism, but I would hate for this to be seen as some sort of victory lap for the department in terms of innovation. This is not a victory lap for the department in terms of innovation. If you were to look at the aggregate spend on Maven over its entire life cycle, you're probably not touching 1% of the annual department RDT&E budget, much less $0 in terms of the department's procurement budget, right? We're not talking real money from a department perspective. And so, when I hear Maven used disproportionately, and I would throw out other initiatives, like DIU, for example, being used to sort of like justify the department has somehow solved innovation, or that we were even in a position just to scale something and make it work. I actually don't believe fundamentally that's true. When you look at the department's investments in this space and you compare it to industries, the public markets have spoken on this, right? What is the most valuable hardware company in the world? The fastest growing ever is NVIDIA. It's built on the back of AI, right? Look at OpenAI, which is now the fastest growing software company in history, right? Approaching valuations of $100 billion. The public markets have spoken on the importance of data and AI. Investors have spoken on it. Industry has spoken on it. Without a hesitation. After the drops of generative AI, you had investments of $10 billion into OpenAI by Microsoft, $4 billion by Amazon. Meanwhile, the department's spending in terms of data and AI have been relatively small. And the opportunity. I don't speak for the program. I have not spoken for the program in a long time. However, having left the program now for a year and being able to reflect on what we built, it does concern me that it is not necessarily at the scale that we can look at it to say this solves the department's problems in terms of innovation. And I would advise anybody with that temptation to sort of look at the numbers and the facts, because I think they tell a very different story.
Okay. One thing there, so I fully agree with these guys, obviously, and joke I'll give you a better stat on the cloud compute capacity from a GPU perspective available to the DoD on classified networks today compared to just OpenAI. And I think it's less than 0.1% in comparison or something like that. Yeah, hopefully OpenAI stays on America's side. At the end of the day, we also recognize that Palantir, I just celebrated my 19-year anniversary of Palantir, right? It's been a long journey. Let's say it wasn't that easy, and there were a lot of things that we learned along the way, but we also have to take the things that we've built as a company and we have to lend them forward, right? So when DIU identifies a really great technology, are there places that they can land them? You've got the awesome work Tyler and the team at Second Front are doing with Platform One. Those guys have changed how hard or how easy it is to get your software into the hands of a warfighter and actually start to get feedback on it and see, is there really product market fit? Where do we push that, right? Similar for the work that Maven's done with MSS, how do you use it as a mechanism to recognize the infrastructure that NGA is running, not just on the inferencing side, but truly on the data management side, figuring out what those, what is that kind of golden table of XYZ on any place on Earth to do the mission that you need to achieve? How do you start to open up that ecosystem to other companies? So what you're doing is trying to compress the time it takes to go, and this is what the VCs and private equity folks want to see, compress the time it takes to go from good idea to somebody who's interested in trying it to getting real data on an ATO'd kind of network or in a framework that then a warfighter can give feedback on, and then you can figure out where do we go from here. And I think on our end, we've kind of invested in this from a First Breakfast initiative. You can check out the Substack. Our CTO, Shyam Sankar, has got lots of awesome articles and content up there. But what's really interesting is to now see, and again, not that the innovation problem is solved, but I would definitely argue we're starting to hit an inflection point with what Dr. Plum is doing and CDAO with the Open Dagger initiative. How do we take all that info at Maven? How do we take the investment that NGA has made to certify and build out this cloud compute capacity, take the investments DIU is making to bring in technology and actually accelerate that delivery into the global information dominance experience and into the hands of warfighters to just start to get that kind of like that flywheel going at a much faster pace. And I think compared to where we started, we've gone from years, I would argue 2 months. And we'll see if we can get that down to weeks, if not days.
Well, I really appreciate your commentary, actually, that this is not a victory lap, but it is a nice positive story. And then there's so many negative stories and so many times when we can get up on a stage and talk about what went wrong. And it's nice to be able to talk about something that worked out. And it's been amazing to have all of you. I'm very conscientious of the time, and that Christine says I can go for maybe one more question. But I think what I would just want to ask, maybe as a quick hit from all of you, is what happens next? Where do you see, maybe it's where does MSS go next? Where does AI go next? But what do you see on the horizon? Because you're all still engaged in this problem.
I think that the DoD need to do a better job of like understanding how to buy software and really fundamentally like understand what technology companies and software companies, how we build a capability and how that capability is really delivered for them. So that is improving, but there are some signs of concern, right? So a friend of mine just recently reminded me of a Silicon Valley, the TV show episode. If you haven't watched the show, highly recommend. And there was this moment where the main character was talking about his software and he was like explaining to a bunch of sales guys and they couldn't get it. And then one of them said, well, is it kind of like a box and like a brain in a box? And then all of a sudden his software turned into a box that they would sell, right? And so the challenge is like, the DoD will pay $50,000 for a box, and that box may take the form of a small drone or a missile, but fundamentally it's the software that they're buying. And $50,000 for unsustained software, rather than they would prefer to do that than pay $10,000 for a software license for 5 years when the software is sustained and improved. And so this is part of the challenge, is that we have to get this, get away from the idea that engineering services does not mean they are a technology company. That's not to take away from anyone who does that work. But a technology company is something very different, and it provides a very different capability that the DoD needs. So there are signs of concern where they don't necessarily understand that. There are signs of improvement. We've got to really double down on the latter.
Yeah, I would double down that. I'd say one technical thing, one kind of procurement thing. I think on the procurement side, there is a fixation on cost. And this is something we deal with every single day. And oftentimes we're losing sight of value in the outcome. And, half of our business at Palantir is commercial, almost exactly. And in the commercial world, there's a clear ROI that you can calculate, right? And in some ways it's easier, in some ways it's harder. So that's something that in DoD and more broadly across the government, I don't think there's a great framework for, right? And to the point, you can't always just rely on a hero to show up and kind of figure it out and kind of pave the way. How do you start to apply values and outcomes into the equation around those decisions? I think for the tech in particular on the way forward, I think, look, it's about scaling at this point. I think NGA and CDAO have done a great job of scaling the capability, but there's still have and have not COCOMs. There are still parts of the military departments where this technology can be leveraged and the investment already made can amplify or accelerate their work. And then there are partners. America never goes to war without our partners. It's one of the unique and really incredible things about our country and how we work around the world. And so how do you really put the C and CJAD C2 and ensure that this is getting to the combined force?
I think the acquisition and procurement stories are important here. One of the department is still a very physical organization, and the way that it manifests, its powers through physical systems, right? The application of fires on an adversary. And I think a lesson in Maven we can't gloss over is it was, it's one of the first initiatives. It started as an intelligence initiative, but, with Joe O'Callahan's leadership, it's really delved into the integration of some of these advanced technologies into our physical systems. And I think that is an important thread that we need to continue to pull on as the line between software and hardware becomes increasingly blurred. In warfare, progression, we've certainly seen in Ukraine and Israel, and something that we need to work on. And the procurement story there applies to physical systems as well as it does to just buying software. You know, I would throw out everybody loves a good World War II story, so I'll throw out my favorite one, which is the Higgins boat. You know, if you look at the history of that, I'd advise everybody to read the story. There's a great Marine, Victor Krulak, who's Lieutenant General Brute. He has a biography, and in that he describes the origination of the Higgins boat, where basically it was invented by rub runners and bootleggers in the 1920s. Andrew Higgins tried to sell it to the department when the department realized it needed ships to take Marines ashore in World War II, and fought for 7 or 8 years to have the department actually believe that his ship was the most capable. Meanwhile, the department, futzed around in R&D and intended to build their own, and they just never got there. And it wasn't until a year or two before the war that this Marine innovator named Victor Krulak got together with Andrew Higgins, and they began building these boats in mass. Right? There's a procurement and an integration story that I see in World War II that I see repeating when I look at what Maven is doing today, or when I see the department working on things like Replicator, that we need to pull that thread harder and faster, because when we talk about physical systems today, they're no longer physical systems, they're integrated systems. So the lessons that apply to software also apply to hardware, and we need to look at both of those.
Joe, you get the last word.
Yeah, I think we're at a point where we're going to get into a really risky era. Maven as a concept, beyond just a software, almost a movement, has done phenomenal things. And you heard Admiral Holland talk about the 3 C's, right? One of them is culture. If the culture doesn't mature quick enough at scale in the Department of Defense, then we won't have the voices behind the funding necessary to maintain the BAAs that are out there, those broad agency announcements that are crucial working with industry to move very quickly. Additionally, we won't fund NGA's infrastructure, right, to do this. And we're going to continue to require them to eat their own base to support what's been done. And so unless we can arrive at a cultural understanding that crosses joint boundaries, that permeates service cultures, and allows us to start understanding the value, the inherent value of software as a service, platforms as a service. We don't need, to Joe's point, very fixated on physical boxes that we have to have. If we can't make that evolution, then what you're going to see is an era that's going to be written in books that lasted about 2016 to 2024. That's what we're really up against. So hopefully that education is that culture will really take root and get us over that Rubicon there.
Well, I can't say thanks enough for setting up the next conversation quite so well, because you laid a lot of the traps for that conversation that's about to happen. And we've had an incredibly successful conversation, except for the fact that we did not leave any time for questions. So my apologies. We had a good conversation. People will be around afterwards, I think, for the cocktail hour. We're going to take a quick 5-10 minute break. 15 minute break. Christine will call you to order and get the next set up. So thank you all so much.
All right, let's get started. So first, I want to thank all of you for being here. I want to thank Admiral Hewlin for coming from CENTCOM to give us such an inspiring and operationally focused kickoff. And I thought everyone on our first panel certainly set us up perfectly for this panel that is talking about indeed scaling software and AI for DoD applications. So I couldn't imagine a more accomplished and influential panel to help us tackle that really challenging issue, and the one that's clearly on everyone's mind. I could be here all day giving the intros of this illustrious group, and I'm not going to do that, but I am going to give a few highlights on each one, and I'm going to start here with Bob Work. So in just a few words, Bob is a Marine. He was, there you go for it. He was Secretary Richard Danzig's senior military assistant, and Bob and I are working with Secretary Danzig now, and I fully appreciate what that means. Very challenging, very inspirational. Undersecretary of the Navy, Deputy Secretary of Defense, the father of the third offset strategy, the father of Maven as a result, He was the vice chair of the National Security Commission on Artificial Intelligence. He is an author. He is a visionary. He is a leader, and I'm very proud to call him a friend. So thank you, Bob, for being here.
Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Margie Palmieri. I've known Margie a long time too, and it's been a privilege. Margie has also devoted her life to the Defense Department and national security. Early in her career, I observed senior leaders seek Margie out to help them through her strategic and thoughtful approach. And she was the special assistant to the vice chief CNO. She was asked to be the chairman of the leader of the chairman's CAG under General Milley. She's helped a lot of leaders you know well be very successful, but she has gone way beyond helping leaders be successful to becoming a very successful leader in her own right. And she serves now as the Deputy Chief Digital Artificial Intelligence Officer. And they're really lucky to have her because her experience with technology, strategy, and leading change, critically important in that role. So Margie, thanks for being here. Admiral Whitworth. Vice Admiral Whitworth has contributed greatly to the Defense Department as a leader in the intelligence community. He's directed many, did I say many, intelligence directorates, including the Joint Staff, JSOC, and NAVCENT, to name a few. He understands the targeting process deeply. He was served as the National Security Agency Chief of Targets for Central Command. In his current position as the director of the National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, he's in a key position to help us understand scale, to understand the opportunities and challenges he faces in scaling software and AI for DoD. So Admiral Whitworth, thank you. Thank you for coming. And then last, I will introduce our last speaker, Doug Beck. Doug is the head of the director of the Defense Innovation Unit. Doug joins us right off of a plane from Chile, and I am very grateful that he made such a tremendous effort to join us today. You know, in DoD, we often struggle to find the right person to lead an organization. DIU is one of the most challenging in my view, because there you need to find someone that can understand and talk with credibility, with meaningful relationships to industry partners. But he also has to understand DoD. It's wonderful, complex challenges and hurdles, but also opportunities, but you have to know how to work within the system to achieve them. So I think DoD was very lucky to attract Doug. First, he comes from sort of large tech company, Apple, where he had kind of a senior position, vice president, and reported directly to Tim Cook. But importantly, Doug is also a captain in the US Navy Reserve. And importantly, he has served in Iraq and Afghanistan and throughout the Asia Pacific. So he understands the operational side of things and what operators need. And he understands the Defense Department and the Pentagon. So again, Doug, thanks for making the trip from Chile to join us. And thanks to all of you for being there. So let me launch into some questions. And Bob, I'd like to start with you. So you were Deputy Secretary of Defense. You saw the third offset strategy as a priority. And that initiative led you to establish the, I always get this wrong, Algorithmic Warfare Cross-Functional Team. But later that got shortened to Maven. We just heard from Joe Larson and the first panel about the hurdles that you faced from starting Maven. But you saw it from the top. You saw it, and you were the person that they came to help them clear those hurdles. So I'd love to hear from you, from your perspective. What were those hurdles? What were those challenges? And frankly, if you're willing to share, what frustrated you the most?
Well, it's great to be here, Christine. Thanks for CSET and for John Hopkins Applied Physics Laboratory to set this up. And thank you all for being here this afternoon, too. I want to preface my remarks by taking you back to 2014. That's when I became the Deputy Secretary of Defense. The Secretary of Defense at the time was Chuck Hagel. We talked a lot about what he might want to focus on, and we quickly came to the opinion that we really needed to shift the department's attention away from the desert and towards our great power rivals. And a specific aspect of that competition was the military technical competition, in which it was important for us to prevail in. So we went to the DSB, the Defense Science Board, asked them, you know, there's a lot of things we could concentrate on. We could concentrate on quantum science, artificial intelligence, synthetic biology. And the DSB came back and said, there is one thing that would have the broadest and deepest impact on the Department of Defense, from the back office all the way to the foxhole, and that was autonomy. Now, of course, to get autonomy, you need top quality artificial intelligence. A lot of people seem to think that the DSB summer study of 2014, which was, I think, actually published in 2015, was about AI. It was about autonomy and what that would bring to the Department of Defense. So then run forward to February of 2015, we were working on the POM 16. And what we would do, the DMAG, the Deputies Management Action Group, is where we would make all the decisions on resource allocation, you know, how many F-35s would we buy, and all of those. And in the research and engineering, or the research and engineering DMAG, that's where the SCO, the Strategic Capabilities Office, led by Will Roper, would come and say, these are the things we would like to do. And Will Roper was in a kind of unique position because the SCO was kind of one of these off to the side organizations. And he argued for a machine learning project to improve our automatic target recognition software. Now, at that time, no one in the department even knew what machine learning was. And he came, he briefed, I think he asked for $10 million. And there wasn't a single vote in favor of it. None of the services agreed on spending the money. ATL, Acquisition Technology and Logistics, said, let's not spend the money on this. And I overruled them. And the reason why I did, as I kept thinking, the thing in my mind was GPS, the Global Prepositioning System. None of the services wanted to pay for the receivers. And without the receivers, you don't really have any type of a capability. But Bill Perry said, well, thank you for your interest in national security. You will pay for the receivers and we will get the GPS. And it caused such a transformation across the board. And I said, you know, sometimes the services just don't see the possibility. And that was what was so vexing about AI. You know, you could go to a warfighter and say, what do you think about guided munitions? What do you think about a HIMARS that can shack a target at 70 clicks reliably? Man, I really like that. So you didn't have a lot of pushback, but we didn't have any examples that we could give warfighters that say, this is how AI is going to make you a better, more effective, and more lethal warfighter. And I think that was really causing us a lot of problems. So in 2017, I was getting ready to leave the department, and I said, we need a Pathfinder program of some kind to capture the imagination of the warfighter, convince them that AI was something they need to get smart on and they needed to pursue. So I gathered a group of people in my office. Will Roper was there. I think Jack Shanahan was there, but I can't remember for sure. And I said, look, I don't want to have just an intelligence application. I want something that will have an impact on operations, on battlefield effects. And we quickly said, thing we could grab a hold of right now was the Predator, which was bringing down thousands of hours of full motion video. We would have 7-person teams that work 7 days a week, and they could essentially process 15% of the take. And the other 85% just was thrown on the cutting room floor. And so Jack Shanahan, who really got AI and the potential, he said he was the director of warfighting integration and support in the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence. And he said, let's use machine learning on the Preds to look at all the take, 100% of the take, and to provide useful information to warfighters, analysts, commanders, et cetera. We said, what are we going to call this thing? And Will Roper said, look, because we were out of cycle. We weren't, we were going to go to Congress to say we want to start this new program. There would have been a new start. No, bad, 18 months from now. And Will Roper was in the meeting. He says, hey, I've got this thing called Maven. I called my target recognition work Maven, and the SASC likes it. So why don't we just call your work Maven and add it all together? And so I slapped the table and I said, so let it be written, so let it be done. It will be Project Maven. And it worked. I mean, we didn't have to go up and explain to Congress this was a new start, a different program and everything. And so Maven began. Now, I believe that the MSS and Scarlet Dragon is the equivalent of the assault breaker demonstration in 1982, in which the Department of Defense demonstrated the ability to put together a battle network, find targets that were deep, and shoot guided munitions to kill the targets. And that led to a whole revolution in military affairs based around guided munitions warfare. And I really think that what 18th Airborne Corps accomplished was pretty much exactly what Bill Perry accomplished with the assault breaker demonstration. So any warfighter who gets briefed on this and doesn't get what this can provide for them probably shouldn't be in command. And certainly shouldn't be a warfighter, because if they don't proceed, if they don't go after it, they're going to be putting their soldiers, sailors, airmen, Marines, and coasties at risk in the future. So I just have to tip my hat, 18th Airborne Corps, and say this could be the start of something big. And the only thing I regret is it didn't happen in 2017, because then we would have really gotten a lot of stuff. So what did we face? We're out of cycle. Where's the money going to come from? The services don't want to, take any money out of their program. We've already locked our palm. Those are the most terrible words that you could ever hear. The palm is locked, and if we do this, we're going to have to take something from out of our palm. So first you had the pushback from the services themselves, just like they did with the GPS. And the second thing was Congress. You had to make sure that Congress wasn't going to, stop you. So we went over and we explained to them what we were doing. We explained to them, hey, this is a program called Maven that you approved like last year, and we're just making it bigger. We're going to scale. And they allowed us to continue. And then there's the many people who would say, AI isn't a thing. This is going to be another AI spring. We're going to wind up in an AI winter. We're going to spend a lot of money, and it's not going to be, we're not going to get an ROI on it. So there was all sorts of that. And I was trying to figure out where do you put this thing? And God, we were so lucky that Jack Shanahan was right there in USDI. And he had a Marine colonel by the name of Drew Kukor, who was going to be here today, but unfortunately couldn't come. And Drew is one of the trilingual experts that Emmy talked about this morning. Although he was a career intelligence officer, he was a warfighter, very technically savvy, and he knew contracting and acquisition processes down cold. So he was a bureaucratic ninja like no other. And he was able to kind of, go through all of the different places who said, wait, slow. Let's wait till next year. You're out of cycle. And he was really effective. And then he and Jack, I told them, whenever you hit an obstacle, come to me and just walk into my office and say, we've got a problem. So the first problem we had is no one was giving up the data so we could annotate it to train our algorithms. So one of the first memos I wrote after Maven is, okay, services, you will turn over this data with the unstated, I don't want to use the word threat, but the unstated understanding that if they didn't give up the data, we would take money away from them anyway. And there were several things like that. The data at first was all classified. And it was, this is data from Afghanistan and Iraq. All we were looking for was the metadata and being able to, tag the data so we could train algorithms. So I said, you will declassify all the data. So there were some, things up front, and we'll get into this. On any big move like this, you've got to have the most senior level of the department. I would say nothing less than an undersecretary of defense level who can clear out all of the issues that are going to come up whenever you do something new and out of cycle. I'm sorry, talked too long.
No, that was exactly why everyone was riveted. So thank you. But I will now turn to Margie, who with CDAO is picking up a good part of all of what started here. So Margie, your mission in CDAO is to accelerate DoD adoption of data, analytics, and artificial intelligence. I like this, from the boardroom to the battlefield to enable decision advantage. So one of your recent initiatives has been to make MSS available across the operational forces and not through, the program of record and the multi-year process that goes with it. And I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about that initiative, how you started it, what you're excited about, what you're worried about.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think all of the lessons from 2014 to 2017 to 2024 all apply. And we learn them and we iterate and we mature them. So Open Dagger, which is our open data and analytic government-owned interoperable repositories. You don't have to remember that.
Wow, I'll never remember that.
It's open. It's a dagger. It's dangerous, but it's open. That's just think of it that way. But it really was this recognition that the government is largely sold capabilities in stacks and vertically integrated stacks. And what that does is create silos across all different, locations and applications. And our data is one of the most valuable things that we own and run, and we really needed to free our data. And we started asking ourselves in CDAO, in order to get America's best talent, software talent, solving our hardest problems, we had to give them our data. To Secretary's point about, you had to declassify it. That was one. Well, you also have to, find an environment to give it to people and to invite others to come and open, develop on top of it. So in order to open up and free our data out of the vertically integrated platforms, we recognize that this is a technical principle that's very familiar to anybody who designs systems, tight coupling versus loose coupling. But we had to buy it through contracts. And that meant that in order to enforce a technical architecture, we had to do it through contract language, which is one of the most convoluted ways to build anything I've ever heard of, but that's how we do it in the government. So we had to think about how to take a different acquisition approach to the data platform and making the data in the platform open, and then inviting third parties to come in and develop on top of that data. As part of the Open Dagger initiative, the first place we did that was with Maven Smart System, and our super, just very lucky to have a great industry partner who's willing to go through this, uncertainty with us around new business models, new cost models, new incentive structures, new ways to protect IP, new ways to, do we pay you based off the API ping? Like, how does this actually work? We're working through that right now, as we just completed a 6-week sprint. But you can look across DoD's information environments and see, even in the Advana platform that we currently run in CDAO, it is all government purpose rights, but it is pretty closed to third-party development. It's not closed, it just takes a long time to get there. As we look at our capabilities, what we really want to do is free the data for others to develop on. And the other, so that's one from the technical side and the contract and business side. The other one is back to inside the building processes, which the services also do not like to do anything that supports not the services. And I have 17 years in the Navy. I was a resource sponsor. I was a resource sponsor of a maritime operations center and a combatant command called INDOPACOM, and am guilty of exactly what I'm about to say, which is that we don't like to invest in the combatant command level and the decision-making that happens above the operational level. So as we in CDAO stood up, we recognized that there was a really good opportunity for us to take low-hanging fruit, a problem that we knew the combatant commands are the first line of decision-making inside the department, below the Secretary of Defense and the deputy and the OSD staff and the chairman and the vice chairman. But they're really the ones that see the situation and make the recommendations, and we had to arm them with better data and decision-making tools. So we took that into the CDAO portfolio directly, and because of that, we got to actually see across all the different commands what they were trying to do. There were lots of similarities. There were differences. Combatant commands are not created equal. And so we needed to be able to tailor the decision-making tools for them while retaining government data rights and making our data open to all those different tailored applications. So that's the journey we're on in CDAO as part of our current line of effort.
It's an exciting journey and it has a lot of opportunity, but I think it also offers a lot of challenges for CDAO, but also for NGA. So I'd like to turn to Admiral Whitworth. So Maven requires a lot of infrastructure, a lot of support, and a lot of data, a lot of power, and a lot of resources, let's just say. And as Open Dagger is sort of making this more and more available, it feels like that's going to increase those challenges. And I was wondering if you could say a little bit on NGA's perspective of that. How are you dealing with these challenges? Are you able to deal with these challenges? What are you most concerned about?
Yeah, thanks for this question. Thanks for this group. And I thought that the panel just before us did a nice job of showing the transition from project to program Maven. And I'll just offer, as part of this history, that's been a kind of very wonderful living history. In my first meeting with some of these people who had done such a great job, I asked some very hard questions before we were about to inherit this then project, and with the task from the Undersecretary of Defense for Intelligence and Security to make it a program of record. And they were largely about return on investment, and they were largely about stewardship. And that was probably very uncomfortable for them. But what they didn't know is that I was a believer. Having been, over 30 years invested in the targeting tradecraft and knowing that we needed to do this. And what I witnessed over the next several months of my personal observation and my team's observation and investment was it was the real deal, especially from an agility of code perspective. And I hearkened back to my own experience in the 2002, 2003 timeline when I was working with US CENTCOM, and in some code that we had back then, it was exclusively intelligence professionals working with industry. And very few people know the story of something called Joint Targeting Toolbox, which effectively was broken just before we were about to start OIF, Iraqi Freedom. And just kind of an Apollo 13 approach of a very small group of people fixed that, but it was amazing how much lead time we required in order to fix it. And what I was witnessing at the time that we brought this program on was the ability to do these fixes at literally the desktop level, where the code was that agile. And frankly, also some of the people who were, whether they were contractually related or governmentally related, were that responsive. So this then, for me and for our agency of nearly 16,000 people, made total sense when you think about exactly what your question is, which is the scale of the situation as we move this. I thought the last panel did a very nice job of translating imagery equals data. And it's larger and more amounts of data than anybody realizes until you actually humanize it. And everyone remembers when you accidentally take a picture and it's high res and you want to send it to somebody and it chokes. Especially if you try 2 pictures, right? That's us times a gazillion every single day. That is the amount of data that we're talking about. And so a lot of Americans don't realize that we move and store in the IC cloud that does exist more data, ones and zeros, than any other agency. I won't tell you how much, but it's by a lot. And so it makes total sense. If you're thinking about this from a very American perspective, you harken back to JFK and to some other quotes where we go for the hardest thing. Well, let's go for the hardest thing. Let's go for imagery, and let's go for an agency that stores and moves the most data. So your question on infrastructure is exactly right. What it tends to do now is to ensure that we do this correctly, and instead of it being a project that brings excitement and brings energy, it's now bringing also stewardship and scale. And I'm very impressed thus far with the progress that we have been making, especially in the fact that in less than a year it became a program of record and is now actually the first software application to receive JROC validation, the Joint Requirements Oversight Council. It's effectively the way of saying, yeah, okay, this is for real. This is what the department will invest. We're investing everyone we can in the future of Maven, and this will then translate into some challenges for the future as we look to the tension between warning and targeting. Right now, this is exclusively about targeting. Maybe, and I don't want to keep talking, but maybe in a few minutes, we can talk about how we translate what we've learned thus far in targeting into a larger issue of finding those things which are different and maybe troubling compared to a baseline that need to be at least noticed. That wonderful triage, that kind of queuing that happens between a machine and a human. Finally, how to translate all those analysts and their experience, 10, 20, 30, 40 years of experience into training that entry-level analyst that is the model. And that's what that's really, I think, the secret sauce of NGA and the NGA enterprise is translating all that experience into the evolving wisdom of a model.
Thank you. So Doug, our study shows the critical importance of commercial technology to the development of MSS and to the future of the department's ability to embrace artificial intelligence as Bob envisioned originally. So one of the outcomes of this study, a term that Emmy actually coined, is this importance of this trilingual leader that we had in Drew Kukor, that we have in Joe Callahan. But you know, while the 18th enjoyed that trilingual leadership in Colonel O'Callaghan, most operational commands don't have that luxury. Trilingual leaders don't grow on trees. And I think that's where DIU comes in. And my question for you is, do you agree with that? And are you feeling more and more of a pull from the operating forces? And if so, how are you responding to that?
So first of all, thanks, Christine. Thanks to CSET, and thanks to my innovator mates and spiritual innovation father up here at the table, as well as to all of you for being here today. Maybe a couple of quick thoughts on your question. The first is that demand is now off the charts. And I would say that whereas 5 years ago, DIU, and I experienced this in some of my part-time capacity before I came aboard full-time, was having to show up and say, you know, hey, can we help? We really think tech might make a difference here, and it'd be really neat. Look at this thing we can do. Today, the warfighter who is trying to solve the hardest problems gets it, right? And you heard that, what that sounds like today from Admiral Hewlin, you know, who's a consummate operator, working for a set of consummate operators, and they get it. And so we are embedding, and this is a big part of what the DIU 3.0 strategy is all about. We are embedding kind of all over the place as a result of that in order to both capitalize on that and to build on it so that we're in a place to be able to say, what are the most critical problems that you're trying to solve? How can tech help solve them? How can we help with that? And or how can we help bring others in from within the Department of Commercial Technology to help make that happen? So for example, out at OPACOM, we're deeply embedded. Our AI ML tech lead is embedded out there as the Deputy Director CTO for the Joint Mission Accelerator. And as Admiral continues to evolve his structures, we're deeply embedded, kind of the heart of all of that. Out in UCOM, we have an embedded UCOM headquarters, as well as out at the Security Assistance Group Ukraine. The S&T lead is a DIU embed, and we've got people on the team there who can help to operationalize things like the cross-domain movement of data that we were talking about earlier today. And we're building the team at CENTCOM, SOCOM, elsewhere. That's actually why I was off a plane from Chile, because I was down there with General Richardson and the chairman yesterday. So this is all about solving those most critical operational capability gaps, which starts with having people who are trilingual effectively there embedded with the team. And I don't mean LNO, because I've been an LNO and I've been an embed with my uniform on. I mean embedded in the team, part of the team. And I think that's worth celebrating, but I also think back to the point from the earlier group, it's not time for a victory lap yet. Because that trilingual capability of the kind that Joe Callahan represents, he's very much part of the merry cabal that I like to describe of, this community that tries to get after this. That evolution kind of tracks over time to how DIU kind of has evolved over time, going back. Actually, forgot one of the things that Bob worked at, helped to father, which was DIU together with Secretary Carter from the very beginning at DIU, then X. And that 1.0 period of DIU really built the bridge using what we call dual fluency capability. And at first, it was really just building a bridge and introducing people, and that really was just dual fluency. But they very quickly married that up with a more trilingual capability to bring rapid acquisition contracting ninjas who understood authorities we already had and put those in place so that we could put real points on the board, put prototypes in place and do it quickly. With that, what we've got to do now, though, is apply that for true strategic impact. And what that means is partnering in a completely different way with the rest of the department to get that done. That means partnering deeply with the services and taking that contracting ninjutsu and applying it to more bureaucratic ninjutsu, and also deep trust-based partnerships with the services, with our partners across the rest of the Office of the Secretary of Defense, with the Joint Staff, to be able to truly scale things. That's why, for example, we signed an MOU with CDAO. Rada Plum and I signed an MOU just, a month or so ago, sort of describes a upside down triangle where we help bring that great technology in AI and ML. They set the standards and the policies and put the conditions in place to be able to truly scale those things for the department. And that's how we work together to make all this happen. So for our team, this is really about us as an organization using the reports language, which I thought was very good, Emmy. To become more truly trilingual and take what that third language means to the next level, because that's what we have to do. MSS is a great example, but it's just getting started, and we need a ton more examples of that to scale.
Thank you. So we heard a couple times now, it's not time to take a victory lap. But I've also heard a couple times now that software is the key to our competitive advantage, and that there's people out there that understand that, and the operating forces, they want to be innovative. And you were just called the spiritual innovation father. So, spiritual innovation father, what advice do you have for those visionary leaders that are out there that want to innovate and want to do this, but face the bureaucracy of the department?
Well, I think everybody who's worked in this area is probably a little impatient. We've been talking about this since 2015 and 2016. The 2017 National Defense Strategy explicitly called out autonomy, AI, and said that we were going to go after commercial applications of it. And this is a shining example. I mean, Scarlet Dragon MSS is a shining example of what we're looking for. But as Doug said, we don't have a lot of them. We have some others, Task Force 59 out in the Gulf, again, led by a very energetic and innovative commander. So I've got this maritime domain awareness problem. I don't have the number of ships I need. I can't get the total number of aircraft I would need. Unmanned systems, autonomous unmanned systems would help me crack this nut. And he just kind of did it exactly like 18th Airborne Corps did. Started working with DIU, started working directly with people in industry, and pretty much cracked the nut. I mean, it was very, very impressive. And now we have a combatant commander, Admiral Paparo out in Indo-PACOM, whose entire theory of victory to defeat the Joint Island Landing Campaign is to rely on autonomous unmanned systems. So you're seeing things happen. And when I just get so frustrated, I say, why are we going so slow? Again, I go back to the assault breaker example. Bill Perry was, the Secretary of Defense told Bill Perry, you are going to be the person who puts this demonstration together. I want you to go as fast as you can. And Perry did. But we did not have the demonstration in the desert until 1982. It was about 6 years, because you had to put together the fusion centers, you had to develop the effectors, you had to develop the battle network, and that takes time. And he finally demonstrated it, and everyone goes, holy moly, this is going to be big. And so, I go from 2016 to 2024. It's about the same amount of time. As I said, I believe that Scarlet Dragon is like Assault Breaker. And so I would really think that we're going to start to see more and more as we go to scale. Now, Replicator is going to be a big part of this. You have the Deputy Secretary pushing attritable autonomous systems in all domains and in high numbers. And we're supposed to see thousands of these systems by mid-2025, calendar year 2025. So you can see the—
We'll see.
I'm sorry?
We'll see.
We'll see. So you're starting to see all of this movement. And so my message to the people who are impatient and despondent that we haven't gotten as far as they would like is, man, we are just about ready to have a new era of development and fielding and experimentation. I just got to read a bootleg copy of the Army Warfighting Concept that is coming out soon. General Jim Rainey down at the Army's Future Command and all of his staff have been working on it. And it is motivating. You just read it and you can see how the Army is saying, we are going to go to human-machine integrated units. We're going to change our formations. Robots will lead so that people aren't the first one to come into contact with the enemy. I mean, it is just exciting. You see what the Marine Corps is doing with Force Design 2030. And again, that's all, AI, autonomy, it's all over that. So I am quite upbeat on where we find ourselves at this point. And if we can scale, you're going to need top-level leadership. You have that in the Deputy Secretary right now. You're going to have the resources. And I believe that the resources, we're going to be flat. We're not going to have a lot of money, but we're going to have enough money to do what we need to do in this area. So, yeah, it's pretty exciting.
I love it. So Margie, it is exciting. And, our study of Maven Smart System and how the 18th used it and what it meant shows that we believe there's a lot to be excited about. This is real. This is a real deal. But there are other approaches to AI-infused C2 techniques that are out there that people want to advocate for. And I've heard senior leaders in differing places and differing organizations say, it needs to be driven from the top. Somebody needs to say, this is it, this is the one, this is the AI-infused C2 system we're going to use. How is CDAO thinking about these competing approaches and balancing resources and support and just thinking about that challenge?
Yeah, absolutely. There are things that there are principles that we as a Defense Department need to enforce in how our systems are architected and how we buy capability. After that, the capabilities really need to be driven by the operational problems. And when you go down to the 18th Airborne, you just get this sense of something different is happening here. And it's not just because the leadership there is, pushing something on their people, although maybe when they started they needed to, but I doubt it. You really do see a learning environment, one where their individual members are contributing in ways that you would never expect. We saw an operations resource specialist in ORSA that wrote his own code on top of the Maven system because he found a better way to do something, and that he just had an idea. And as a trained ORSA, he was able to create a capability right from the start that changed the way they thought about how they worked that mission. And so you absolutely cannot stifle it, and you absolutely have to enable it. And so in CDAO, we think a lot about not what can we deliver in CDAO? We think about that too, but really, what can we deliver that enables the innovation to happen across the department? The answers are not going to all come from the Pentagon. Most of them.
It isn't so.
Say it isn't so. I know. The good ones are going to come from the people that are closest to the problem, and you have to give them the tools and the data and the capabilities and the understanding to be able to pull that together in real time. And I think that your study showed that industry developing side by side with operators is absolutely key. When the industry better understands the mission and operators better understand the technology, the conversation and the feedback loop that can happen there on what's in the realm of the possible is absolutely critical. And we also know that it's not just about the technology. And so often when we talk about AI or digital, it's a technology conversation. And it is equally a workflow conversation. And what is so amazing about the 18th is that they brought in new skill sets. They changed the way that they did traditional workflows. And if you look at how they do the intel to targeting to logistics to fires decisions, you will not see that replicated in many other places unless they've also taken those lessons and pulled those in. So we really do want to encourage the diversity and the innovation to happen across the department. That said, we can't buy 18 different platforms. We can't buy, the same platform 15 different ways. And so that's the idea behind, can we, from the OSD level, put in place good contract language or contract guidance or playbooks around, so you want to build a software or an AI capability, here's what we expect from a fielding responsible AI perspective. You check these blocks or you use these test evaluation tools, like you're on the the HOV lane to fielding capability. So we have to provide those types of scaffolding around the projects, but we don't want to dictate, one solution to rule them all. And we've learned time and time again that would actually be more ineffective, would be to allow the innovation to happen more broadly.
I love it. I love it. I would like to carry this theme on, though, to you, Admiral Whitworth. You are now responsible for Maven. You have adopted it. You have made it a program of record. What is your vision for the future of Maven? How do you think about how your responsibilities for Maven can help us achieve these lofty objectives?
So I think success begets challenges. And so to address head on some challenges, and I'll cite a couple of them. So as we've taken this now program of record, the number of detections are way up. I'm not going to go into the exact details, but way up per day. That's great. The number of models that we have are way up. I can go into the exact specifics there, but that then drives a computational problem. So as you drive that many detections through that many inferences with the same level of compute that you had in 2016, 2017, you got a problem. It starts to slow down.
Yeah.
We're already seeing evidence of that. As to the question of vision, so I'm a targeting professional, and I love the fact that this is is really invested in targeting and making targeting, the workflow of targeting better and faster with things that we bring, like locational accuracy. As the founder of WGS 84, the World Geodetic System 1984, and the maintainer of that, it matters to us that that which is plotted is correct. So it makes sense that that's one of the enablers that we have for this future. But I also need, and believe me, there are no routine targets, and all targeting is inherently geospatial. So it's right that we start this conversation and this program with the word targeting. But let's move now into the vision of warning. So you establish baselines as to what is truthful happening on the earth that you can see in the visual domain. That's what our people do. What's anomalous? That is a tall order for the same number of eyes that you're going to have. We're very realistic that we're probably not going to increase the number of eyes that will look at that baseline and determine this is anomalous and I need to pay attention. This is the scale that GeoEnt AI, by virtue of what we've already proven, Maven can build into something that we're now calling Aspen, where you actually will work into the workflows of our kind of everyday industrial level GeoEnt for warning, work the triage. So how do you do that with the same number of eyes if you also involve something called data labeling? Data labeling is a little bit different than the ordinary process of building what we call structured observations, where people go in, they've seen the same things on the earth, and they make their reports, and they make a structured observation. It's indexable, it's archivable. It's great. It's so important later on when you're trying to pick up the breadcrumbs and figure something out. But data labeling is a little bit different. So if I'm going to require my workforce to take 15% of your day and stop what you're doing with structured observations and do some data labeling, they've got a problem. That's a crisis. This is another way of looking at what the panel just before us identified as a potential resource. We have the same number of people, the same amount of compute, and yet we're going to ask them to do data labeling with more detections. Well, that's a little bit of a challenge there. My vision is to continue, frankly, educating, collaborating, and ensuring people know that this is what we're up to responsibly, and that yes, we're going to team with these wonderful machines and these wonderful algorithms and models. But success will bring other challenges, and we're gonna find a way.
Thank you. So Doug, I think there is a theme of the day, which is innovation is needed. It's exciting. We have this wonderful example in MSS. It relies on commercial technology, and that's what DIU is all about. So 1 year in now, a little bit more. I would love you to tell us how you're feeling about our ability to make this happen. It was hard. I think we've heard how hard it was to get to where we are now. Is that what we are facing for the future, for future innovation? Or do you think we're going to be better able to adopt and innovate in the future?
So could the answer be both? I think,
of course it can.
First of all, I think as Secretary Work suggested, there's an enormous amount for us to be very excited about the momentum that we're beginning to build. I would say if I step back and I think about where I was, say, a year ago before coming in, we are way ahead of where I hoped we would be at this point. And we have so much further to go to get to where we need to get to. And some of the things that have happened in terms of just all of what we've talked about, the understanding that is there, the fact that we have warfighters who get it, a secretary who gets it, a deputy who gets it, a Congress who gets it, a commercial tech sector who get it, that is all lined up to be able to make things happen. We've been given so many of the tools as a community to get there, going from not even being at the table to helping set the table through things like Replicator and a bunch of the other structures that that now exist through the department, that we have a budget, which is probably the most talked about, almost, slightly more than 0.1% of the budget, that that you could think of. But what's important about that is the ability to partner and scale so that it's not $1 billion, it's 50 billion or $100 billion of the department moving to go make things happen, which is why that partnership I talked about is so important. That is fantastic. And I feel really good about that. And the biggest challenge that I think we still face is really all about culture. Because change is hard. And sometimes when you start making change, that can be a little scary as well. And the fact is that if I kind of step back and think about those my couple of lenses that you mentioned at the beginning of this, for me, first of all, the most innovative place I've ever worked in my entire life is that Joint Special Operations Task Force that you mentioned that some of my shipmates up here have all been part of. It's how a lot of us got to know each other. And the least innovative place that I've ever worked in my whole life is also sometimes in my experience with the department. And we've got to make sure that we are bottling that capability that we have when we are at the pointy end and acting on it. And that is all about the way that we think about risk. Most of what I thought of as risk before I deployed in my civilian life really wasn't risk, it was uncertainty. And we as a team and as a department have to get far, far, far better at being willing to take procedural risk, process risk, financial risk, look stupid risk, and in order to avoid transferring that into real risk, which is risk to mission, risk to force, strategic risk for our nation. I do believe that we are on our way toward that. And I think that we have still a long way to go. And the best way to get there is to just keep putting points on the board. So that's what we're focused on.
Thank you. So last question to you, Bob. We just heard from DIU. DIU wouldn't exist today if it weren't for Secretary Carter and you personally standing it up. We just talked about Maven. You are the father of Maven. Maven wouldn't exist today if it weren't for you. There's Replicator. Replicator wouldn't exist today if it weren't for Secretary Hicks. Do you ever foresee a time when the Defense Department can make big innovative steps without the direct support of someone as senior as you are?
It would be nirvana. And you would hope that you would get there. But for the foreseeable future, I would say no. So you would need to have a top-level leader, Undersecretary of Defense or higher, that would champion the change and remove obstacles to the change. I mean, if you just take a look, we wouldn't have stealth. The Air Force did not want to buy the stealth, the F-117. Why? Because their program of record, the POM is locked. They were buying the F-15, F-16, and the A-10 all at once. They were recapitalizing their entire tactical air enterprise. And they did not want money from the stealth program taking away from their program of record. And it took Bill Perry saying, read my lips. We're going to go after stealth. I already mentioned the GPS, the MRAP program. Oh my gosh. That would never have gone anywhere without the Secretary of Defense's personal. You are going to buy these systems and save our servicemen and women, period. The golden hour in Afghanistan, where Secretary Gates said, every single person wounded in Afghanistan has to be within an hour's time of a trauma center. And oh my God, we can't do it. It's going to require more helicopters. We're going to have it spread out all over the place. And Secretary Gates would shake his head and he says, that's all probably true. But if you don't do it, you're fired. There are so many things where top-level leadership are absolutely central to these big changes in the department. But the thing that we forget is the young men and women at the bottom, they're hungry for this. They get it. I mean, they live it in their lives. They've been digital natives since they were babies. The Army's Future Command did a exercise for a breach of a complex obstacle that had minefields, trenches, concertina wire, observe fire, all of those things. And that is one of the toughest infantry jobs to do. And generally what happens is you're training up for your mission essential task list, and you start at the squad level, and they say, okay, on a complex breach, this is what the squad does. And they do that for, say, a month. Then they get proficient at that level, and they say, okay, we're going to do it at the platoon level. And they do that for a month. Then the company level. And pretty soon they're proficient, and they execute in an exercise, and generally they pass. They say, okay, we are proficient at this. So the Army Futures Command, who was the first sergeant? General Murray? I think it was General Murray.
General Murray?
Was that right?
We got a yes from the audience.
So they were going to do an exercise of a breach of a complex obstacle using robots. They were going to be teleoperated. They weren't going to be autonomous, but they would be controlled by soldiers, but it would be done by machines. So it was a human integrated combat formation. And I was talking with General Murray, and he went down and he was talking to the soldiers. They said, how long did it take you to get ready for this exercise? It took about a week, sir. And he was flabbergasted. He said, how could this happen? It's because they gave all of the soldiers Xbox controllers it looked like an Xbox controller. And he just handed it to the soldiers, and every single one of them was saying, okay, I'm an expert, let's go. And so that leads me to say that you have to have the top down to say you're going to do this. You are going to have a program of record. You will expend the resources. You will share the data. You will talk to CDAO. You will talk with the National Geospatial Geospatial Intelligence Agency. But at the meantime,
You'll
at the
talk to
bottom,
DIU too.
oh, yeah.
Don't forget that.
In the meantime, there's all sorts of just bubbling going on at the lower part of the force. And as those young men and women go up the chain, they'll be the ones to say, I am going to take all the risks that Doug laid out, risks. Well, I can't say as good as he does, but the risk of looking stupid, not an issue. These young men and women would say, look, I'd rather fail trying than not trying. So, as I said, I'm pretty psyched right now. I wish we were farther ahead, without question. But, it looks pretty, the grass does look greener on the other side of the fence right now.
And with that, I think we will close. Like Emmy, our panel was so interesting. We didn't get to take questions from the audience, but we do have a reception now. We hope some of you will hang around, or as many of our speakers will stay as we close. I do want to thank our speakers. Please join me in a round of applause for all of our speakers, Admiral in the first panel and this panel. I would like to personally thank my study team that has been awesome through all of this. And I would like to thank Emmy and all of CSET for hosting this fabulous event. And thank you all for coming, and I hope you can stay. Thank you.